So, I lived more than 1,000 years ago, back when the corruptors already existed. They were never supposed to exist in this era.
100 million years inside the dark, while the world is falling apart, cities burning to the sky, humanity was left behind, monsters born from poison air.
The world changed, new species were born, and true humanity became the most inferior race of all. I awakened in this new era, because I am the last scientific weapon created by humanity. I'm going to accomplish something I couldn't do alone. With everyone's help, we will destroy these monsters forever. After the year 2100, an incident happened on Earth. Destruction spread all around. The rivers had dried up. In the sky, a man held onto the wing of a jet traveling at supersonic speed. He jumped when he found his target. On the destroyed streets, a boy ran desperately, looking for someone who could help him. His tears flowed uncontrollably. The young one had his escape interrupted by a monster that fell before him. The creature had a muscular body, giant horns curving towards its back, and a wolf-like mouth with extremely sharp teeth. Just encountering it would make someone faint from fear, but the monster did not come alone. Behind the young boy, a second monster appeared. He fell to the ground, surrounded by the two monsters, begging for help. "Please, anyone!" In his hand was a broken picture frame with a photo of a couple and their little daughter. In desperation, the boy made a plea for those who brought the monsters to take them away. In the sky, two lights shone bright. The first energy attack hit one of the monsters, while the man traveling with the jet destroyed the second. The boy, on the ground, was left in awe as he was saved. The man apologized for being late. Upon seeing that powerful person walking towards him, the boy asked who he was. The man stared at him in silence and saw the boy crying, not out of sadness or despair, but out of hope. Finally, humanity could recover, right? With the boy clinging to him, the man agreed with the question. "Yes, now you can sleep in peace." Amid the thanks, the young boy could no longer stand due to his injuries and fell. Melancholy appeared in the fighter's eyes, along with a feeling of recognition. Someone suddenly approached him. "Jim, we couldn't make it in time." Looking back, Jim saw a man in a lab coat adjusting his glasses. His name was Kaguya, revealing that young boy, he was the last survivor of the area. Kaguya asked Jim to admit that humanity would not be saved due to the massive pollution. The mutant monsters had begun to be born. They were called corruptors. They possessed a great regenerative ability. Even nuclear weapons could not annihilate them. Yet, humanity had not given up. They conducted experiments on humans continuously. They finally created countermeasures. However, there were no people left to be saved. It was already too late. Jin had another thought. If there was someone to be saved, they were here. Kaguya questioned if he really thought anyone had survived. Jin shook his head, yet he had hope for the future. "The nano-machines you created will improve the environment, right?" Kaguya agreed. The nano-machines were deployed against the monsters. They destroyed the regeneration of the corruptors. This technology also promoted the restoration of the planet's climate. Jin hoped that one day the planet would regain its former beauty. For when that happened, human civilization would rise once more. Kaguya warned him that this was just a childish dream. But Jin's hope did not fade. Just a maybe, a small possibility, was enough for him. Jin's powers could be needed in the future. Believing in that maybe, he intended to save the world. He was placed in a life suspension chamber. He would be kept cryogenically frozen until his return was truly necessary. 5, 20, 150,000 years. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Time continued to pass on planet Earth. The red cloud that covered the planet slowly was purified over tens of thousands of years. The monsters were beginning to weaken. The sunlight could be seen again. After 100,000 years, the monsters lost what sustained their vital energy. Hundreds of thousands of years passed. The planet regained its ancient life again. After 10 million years, animals existed once more. Rabbits, horses, and fish swam in the sea again. When time seemed to have been forgotten, 100 million years had passed. In Dr. Kaguya's laboratory, the voice of a machine was heard. "Access key confirmed. initiating thawing sequence. In an unknown place, a young man was desperately running after her. There was a young man with pointed ears and a man with large ears, all fleeing from a giant lizard monster. The man was panting as he ran. "Is there really someone here?" The girl nodded. "They will be here." The boy, who was starting to get tired, asked his friend if they would be fried if there was no one ahead. The young girl continued to insist, "They will be here!" While running through the sewers, she was confident that they would find the guardian deity. They ended up in a dead end. In front of them was a single door. They opened it quickly, but there was nowhere to hide in the room they entered. As the young girl tried to find a way to escape, the giant lizard burst into the dark room. The lizard extended its hand, armed with sharp claws, ready to attack them. The girl could only plead, "Someone help us! Please, guardian deity!" Behind the young girl, the glass of a capsule began to crack. A voice emerged in the girl's ears. "Understood. Thawing capsule." A light shone towards the monster. The lizard was pierced and eliminated. An unknown person who saved the trio remarked, "It was worth believing, wasn't it? In the possibilities of a future." Jin walked towards them, holding the power of a spectral mist in his hand. After waking up, Jin located a box that Kaguya had prepared for him. The box had excellent quality. It kept his clothes exactly as they were left after being taken off his body. In front of the screens before him, Jin analyzed the data of the world after 100 million years. Most of the data was corrupted. However, the place he was standing was already surprising, probably thanks to the nanotechnology present in the air. Inside the box, Jin also found an injection with a shining liquid, a nanomachine injector. Wanting to know what happened to the world, Jin took a message cube left by Kaguya. Before anything else, he asked the group in front of him what had happened. It was at that moment that Jin realized he was still naked and apologized. The man with large ears covered the little girl's eyes. While he looked at the man who had awoken after 100 million years, Jin put on his suit and his long coat. Jin wanted to take a look at how the world was. Huge doors opened outside the mountain. When Jin and the fleeing group passed through them, what they found was a brilliant sunlight illuminating a forest torn by a blue river. Jin was amazed, as it was completely different from what he knew before falling asleep. The young girl with furry ears pulled Jin by his shirt. "Guardian, let's go this way." She pointed at the companions who were already moving ahead through the forest. The protagonist frowned as he noticed the features of the young girl. Despite the resemblance to humans, her ears revealed that she was not human, the species that had been extinct 100 million years ago. Probably the people in front of him were descendants who had evolved. The young boy with pointed ears seemed to be a cat boy, while the man with large ears had koala lineage. Jin believed that the changes in the people he saw were caused by the nanotechnology spread across the earth. Speaking the same language as 100 million years ago was already proof that humanity persisted and evolved. Jin approached the girl, planning to introduce himself. "I am Jin Shido. Call me Jin." The girl also introduced herself. Her name was Hakama Fio, and she asked to be called Hakama. The koala man was named Dampo, while the cat boy was Zanda. Pulled by Hakama, the protagonist asked what they wanted from him. The girl kept pulling him. "We're almost there. I want you to defeat the invader." Zanda was the first to arrive at the village, and he panicked at what he saw. The fire had spread through the wooden houses. Everything was being destroyed. Crying in despair, Zanda ran into the village, searching for his parents. The protagonist remained silent, observing the features of the village. There were wooden fences that were not very strong. The houses were also made of wood. This meant that civilization had not advanced much. Jin followed behind Hakama, taking the path that Zanda had run. Hakama stopped running when she became frightened. In front of her was an old woman holding a staff to avoid being bitten by a monster with a huge mouth and many eyes on a skull-like head. The old woman noticed the situation. "Why did you come back?" The protagonist wondered if the creature attacking the old woman was the so-called invader. To him, it looked like a corruptor. Probably in this age, they had changed the name by which it was called. Against the old woman's words, Hakama released a powerful aura. "I won't run away. I will help you." Jin did not stand still watching the old woman being attacked. To find out what that monster really was, he advanced, kicking it. He then picked up the old woman in his arms, retreating while Hakama attacked the monster with magic. The young girl created a fireball, using all her aura, and launched it with a blaze. The attack hit the creature, which screamed before falling to the ground. When the monster fell, a glowing green wound appeared on it, consuming. It was the same regeneration inhibitor he had spread with Kaguya 100 million years ago. After analyzing everything that had happened, Jin wondered if the aura around the girl was, in fact, the gathering of nanotechnology in the atmosphere to generate the attack. That seemed only compatible with humans. They should be able to control it. Curious, the protagonist asked the old woman if everyone could conjure that fireball. She shook her head, stating that only some could. Those with sacred power. There were only 4 in the village, including herself. The protagonist analyzed how they were calling the nanomachines in the current era. He ran to his grandmother, asking where everyone was. The old woman revealed that they had evacuated everyone. She questioned the girl why they had returned. Zandy felt relieved because his parents were safe. However, in the eyes of that elderly woman, the village had no salvation. That corrosive monster from before was just a newborn pup. Eggs were being dragged by the river, where the monsters were being hatched near the village. Against the creature laying the eggs, there was no way to win. Soon, when all the creatures were born, the village would be completely devastated. Suddenly, a man approached. "Stop being a coward, old lady." The man, feline and resembling Zandy, was named Charles. Confident, he carried a spear. "An invader of this level? I will defeat them all." Worried, the grandmother asked where the other villagers were. Carlos scratched his head, claiming he had sent them to the shelter. Hakama excitedly approached her father, a tall man next to Carlos. Concerned about his daughter, he asked where she was. Hakama revealed, "I went to the sealed door." The old woman turned to her. "Hakama, don't you know that is a forbidden place?" Hakama looked away, commenting loudly enough for Jin to hear. "Grandma once told me that the guardian of this village was behind the doors. If the village faced any trouble, he would definitely save us." Hakama's grandmother looked at Jin in surprise, as he didn't seem to be a guardian being. Charles, even less so, believed it. "Oh, please, give me a break. This inferior is the guardian god? Don't make me laugh." The protagonist frowned when he was insulted. Out of nowhere, Xande approached, trying to convince Charles, the older brother. "This person is the guardian god." Surprised, Saros didn't expect the little brother to have the bed. However, Xande's words did not convince him. He approached Jin with a mocking look. "Look at his ears. He is an inferior, with no animal traits." Sarus laughed, stating that the man should only be at the gates. The children ended up getting confused. Chandi insisted, claiming that the guardian had even defeated an invader. Saris continued laughing, mocking. "You mean to say that he defeated a newly hatched baby? Even I would defeat him with a single attack." He pointed the spear at Jin, warning, "This is a problem for our village. We don't need an inferior outsider intervening." Showing how he viewed the situation, he told Jin not to interfere. Hakama's father called for Sarles, seeing him step away. "Where are you going?" Sarles answered arrogantly. "Isn't it obvious? I'm going to defeat that giant invader." He looked back, commanding, "You can sit there waiting." Hakama's grandmother couldn't believe how idiotic Charles was for going alone. He could simply choose to live by running away. The protagonist looked in the direction where the cat man had gone. The old woman approached him, thanking him for the help, even though she didn't know who he was. She then made a request. "If you are willing, take the children to the shelter with my son." Hakama's grandmother had decided to go after Saros to save him in a last-ditch effort. Jin, however, refused the old grandmother's request. "I have my pride." Zeller did too. Hakama was happy to hear him, as he immediately understood what he meant and what he was going to do. The protagonist walked in the direction Carlos had gone, saying, "I can't let him call me inferior and then run off to hand his life over to some monster." By the river near the village, a large monster waited for its eggs to hatch. The water around it became murky and dark. As the pollution that was its source of energy, a young man entered the river. He caught the monster's attention. He charged electricity into his spear. Charles shouted, "I am the man who will carry this country on my back. The today that will become a sacred night, facing the monster of erosion and running in its direction." Charles declared, "I will show that I can take it down alone." Before Charles could reach the monster, several tentacles rose up. At the tips of the tentacles, there were eggs with small monsters inside. The corruptors were born, jumping onto Charles. The young spearman attacked them. Each of his strikes dealt with a small monster. He gathered the thunder energy that flowed through his spear. Charles's goal was to end the battle against the great monster in a single strike. He leaped to the side, approaching the monster's head. The cutting blow struck the great corruptor. A smile appeared on Charles's face when he saw the wound appear. The monster screamed in despair, shaken, as the Catman landed calmly. However, the monster's wound began to regenerate at that instant. Charles noticed what was happening, but could not react in time to the monster's claw counterattack. He closed his eyes, placing his hand in front of his body to try to block the attack. The blow never came, as Jim, between him and the monster, raised a barrier while asking, "Are you done here?" Sarlos was shocked by what he saw, but had no time to think about it. More small corruptors attacked him. He quickly fell back, not believing that the monsters he thought he had defeated were still alive. The protagonist anchored his fingers, and a spike of light sprouted from under the water, piercing the corruptors. As Sarlos stared at the bodies of the monsters in surprise, he heard Hakama's voice. "Grandma, over here!" Hakama, his father, his grandmother, and the others quickly ran through the shallow waters of the river, reaching Sarlos. Hakama was surprised by what he was seeing. The massive-bodied monster was being blocked by the unknown man with just one hand. Jin suddenly warned, "This is starting to get heavy. Let's fall back for now." Before Salz could realize it, he had already been grabbed by the man, who was pulling him back. The monster's strike, which had been held back until then, fell onto the waters, creating a huge wave. Salz was swept away and asked the unknown man who he really was. Those monsters regenerated instantly, even when they took damage. But that was not happening at that moment. Jin explained why. "We need to use the nanomachines to inhibit their regenerative functions." Confused, Charles asked what nanomachines were. Jin stated that people now seemed to refer to them as divine power. The protagonist praised Salz's previous attack, but warned that the strike had been too superficial to reach the inhibition point of regeneration. With so many things being said by Jin, Salz asked if he was really the guardian deity. Jin stated he did not call himself God. On the contrary, there was something he wanted to ask. "You said this was the problem of your village, right?" Salz bravely tried to find a reason for his words. Dinho then corrected him. "You are wrong. This is my problem." That said, he walked towards the monster, which did not stay still. It attacked with tentacles. Jin dodged each of the strikes, getting closer and closer. His goal was to seal the creature's movements. The giant monster could no longer find the human attacking it, as its own attacks created waves that helped it hide. While Charles watched his movements, Jin stated, "These things are monsters born from our folly. That is why I, who have lived through 100 million years, must be the one to solve this." In Jin's hand appeared the concentration of energy from the nanomachines. He reached out his hand to the monster. Preparing his attack, Charles did not understand everything Jin said, but he wanted to know if Jin would really succeed. Jin assured him, "I can. I am the one created by a humanity with a history stained by blood, by unimaginable brutality and misery." Repeated memories of the past surfaced in his mind. Shinshido understood what he really was. "I am the last human." Thus, he extended his hand toward the monster. He unleashed a devastating attack that consumed everything in front of him. The bed and the whole family were shocked by the attack. The young girl soon wore a smile of happiness. Jin's attack crossed not only the river, but also the atmosphere, reaching space. When the attack dissipated, a hole appeared in the clouds. The salt could not even speak. His jaw dropped in surprise. The protagonist clapped his hands, dusting them off. He looked at the sky, concluding his monologue. "I am the last scientific weapon." As the river returned to its tranquility, a woman in glasses, hidden among the bushes, observed everything. She had come to the village just to investigate the latest erosive that appeared in Kadama village, but she ended up witnessing something unbelievable. She tried to understand what she had just seen. Even the captain of the Holy Knights in the royal capital managed to do that. She realized she was confronted with something great. She needed to return to the capital immediately and report to the guild master. The young girl with orange hair, a monocle, and soldier's attire was excited by the discovery. That night, in a secluded area of the forest, the protagonist used the communication cube to hear the message left by Kaguya. A small hologram of Kaguya appeared. "If you are hearing this, it means I am no longer in this world." Kaguya smiled playfully, revealing that she always wanted to say such words. The scientist asked, "How is the future?" The global climate must have improved significantly. However, Kaguya stated that there was a problem. He got straight to the point. Even with the improvement in the weather, the corruptors would not be swept away. Jim remained silent, having already confirmed that information. The scientist spoke a little about his research. He first noticed that something was wrong about 100 years after Jim had gone to sleep. Kaguya also planned to freeze himself periodically to analyze global changes. Thanks to the recovery of the environment, the population of corruptors had stabilized and started to decrease. However, in certain localities where pollution was concentrated, satellites managed to see, through their cameras, corrupt beings that looked like humans. They could even sense that they were being watched by the satellites and were capable of turning them off. Kaguya was able to observe the evolution of the corruptors. He did not know what type of change was happening, but there was no doubt they were becoming a threat. Kaguya revealed that all he could do was prepare new forms of life that could resist, at least a little. Kaguya also revealed that he tried to leave power for Jin. The protagonist, in doubt, took a shining injection from his pocket. Kaguya explained while Jin was already applying it to his arm. If you use this, the nanomachines will show you how you are the only one 100% compatible with them and the only one who can use this power. Energy began to surge around Jin, like an aura, the same that surrounded Hakama earlier, in the village. The protagonist looked at his own hands as the energy stabilized. With a thought, a knife was created in the palm of his hand. Jin learned how to use the power to generate objects, altering the shape of the nanomachines. He imagined this would be quite useful. Confident, Kaguya revealed that he hid enhancements like that in research facilities scattered all over the world. He had not kept them all in one place as a precaution to prevent them from being completely destroyed if they fell into the hands of the corruptors, and mainly, because he wanted Jin to see the world, the protagonist was surprised by his friend's request. Kaguya claimed not to know what kind of threats the corruptors would become, but still, compared to the world of the past, he believed it would be much better. Meanwhile, somewhere on the outskirts of the forest, a young man in armor with golden hair was riding. He was escorted by two women. The excited young woman, who managed to see Jin's power, ran with a smile on her face. She arrived at a city on the edge of the forest. In that city, in one of the houses, there was a young woman with long golden hair wearing noble attire. She was reading by the light of candles. Kaguya was finishing his message to Jin. First, enjoy the new world. I will be around to see it with my own eyes. In the hologram, the passage of time was revealed. Kaguya was getting older. His last words were spoken. I'm counting on you, Din. The message ended, and Din nodded at the words of his old friend. At that moment, Rakama and Dampo came running to Jin. The guardian, Rakama, had finally found him. Dampo warned that everyone was looking for him. Rakama and Dampo held Jin's arms, telling him he should go to the village. The party could not start without the guest of honor. As the children spoke, the protagonist noticed something around Hakama's neck. It was a key-shaped pendant, the access key to the research facility. The protagonist asked Hakama where she had obtained that pendant. Holding the key, Hakama revealed that she had received it from an amazing person a long time ago. It was an amulet passed down through generations. Hakama revealed a message passed down through the years. When the village is in danger, possessing this amulet will bring the guardian to protect us. The protagonist understood how Hakama was able to enter the facility and how he owed them for waking him in the village of the forest. A large bonfire was lit. A party was happening around it. Families spread blankets on the ground. It was like a night picnic. The villagers heard Hakama, indicating the way for the guest. Everyone looked at him. They wondered if he was the guardian deity. They were surprised. Such a deity seemed inferior, no matter how much they observed. When Charles saw some people mocking Jin, he became furious. He started arguing with a group. You were so busy running away that you couldn't notice anything. Charles even punished them with punches. He yelled, praising how amazing the guardian was. Hakama almost rolled his eyes, seeing the extent of the change that SARS presented. Dampo laughed, as SARS was a completely different person now. Hakama's grandmother approached Jin. The protagonist greeted her. The old woman said, "Allow me to say once more, on behalf of the village, I offer our deepest thanks." Hakama's father stated, "If it weren't for you at this moment, this village would have been wiped out. We wish to repay this debt." The protagonist asked them not to worry about it. Hakama's father wanted to insist. Since there was no way to go against them, Jin asked them to repay him by giving information. "I want to know the current state of the world in detail." The request was strange to Hakama's father. The girl's grandmother recommended that he go to the royal capital for better information. That was where the king who ruled the kingdom of Kervonia lived. People from all over the country gathered there, so they were better informed. People from the village Kadama often visited the capital to sell the silk made from the woodworms. The journey was long and treacherous, but the old woman believed that the guardian would be fine. However, Jin did not know the way to the capital. Hakama's grandmother asked her granddaughter to guide him there. She revealed that the child also had business in the royal capital. He became curious about what she was talking about. The old woman reminded him, "I believe you saw for yourself, Lord Guardian, but this child can wield divine power. In the royal capital, there is an academy aimed at strengthening that divine power. We had given up on sending her due to the recent turmoil. However, I would like her to enroll as planned." The protagonist was surprised that there were still schools in a world with monsters. Suddenly, Salz interrupted him. "I am the best to guide the guardian." Hakama's grandmother reminded Salz that he had nothing to do in the capital. The young fighter arrogantly stated, "I do! I will join the sacred knights in the capital." The old woman sighed, saying that there was no way for someone who couldn't even join the academy to become a sacred knight. While the two argued, Jin asked if possessing the so-called divine power was not a guarantee of entry into the academy. Hakama revealed that there was a written exam. Charles was so inattentive that he had failed. The protagonist thought for a moment, becoming curious about such sacred knights. At that moment, the knight traveling on his black horse received news that surprised him. An eroding giant had appeared in the village of Kodama and had been defeated. The young man in front of him excitedly confirmed the information. He revealed that he was on his way to report it to the guildmaster at that very moment. Having imagined that the monster would not be defeated without a sacred knight, he had come there without waiting for the report. He never imagined that by the time he arrived, the monster would already have been subdued. The young woman traveling commented, "I never imagined I would find a sacred knight in a place like this. What a coincidence." As she spoke, she didn't notice that one of the pups of the defeated monster in the river was still alive. It had followed her and was now attacking from behind. The sacred knight was quick, drawing his sword to attack the monster. As soon as the eroder fell, he sheathed his sword, commenting if this story is true. It is quite interesting. The knight's curiosity grew to meet this person in person. The river flowing down from the mountains cut through the village. The next day, Dinho woke up early, enjoying the beautiful morning and the fresh air. He never imagined the day would come when his eyes would find such a lovely view. The trees, the flowers, the green mountains, and the blue sky. Melancholically, Jin commented, "I wish Kaguya could see this too," as he gazed at the scenery. Xanda approached carrying some clothes. With his ears drooping down, the young cat called out to the guardian. He asked Jin to at least wear some clothes. Later that morning, Jin prepared to leave. At the village entrance, he gathered with everyone he knew. The grandmother asked Hakama to make sure to fulfill her role as a guide. Charles was quite unhappy. He thought he would be able to learn about all kinds of things by being next to the guardian. The grandmother said, "You should focus on your studies first." The protagonist approached the young one. His name was Sars. His movements demonstrated yesterday were not bad. "I will be waiting for you in the royal capital." Sars gasped, excited by the comment, crying with joy. He promised he would do his best with his studies. As he fidgeted, Hakama's father joined Jin, asking him to look after Hakama during the trip. He then went toward his daughter and urged her to always take care of her health. So, the two bid farewell, waving to the villagers before leaving for the journey. Jim and Hakama followed a dirt road along a small river. They walked all day. When the sun was about to set, they made a small stop where the river turned into a waterfall above a lake. After drinking some water, Hakama pointed to the sunset, warning that they needed to set up a shelter. The two found some trees where they could lie down. They built a campfire and talked for the first time. Jin asked how far they were from the royal capital. Hakama interrupted her bites of bread. She commented that they would have to walk for 4 more days. Jim said it was closer than he expected. Curious, Hakama asked the guardian why he wanted to know about the world. The protagonist, however, said it was a secret. Jim remembered how Kaguya had said that the corruptors would not be extinct. The words were confirmed, as the monsters still existed, even in this era. However, Jin believed that the corruptors would normally only be able to live in extremely contaminated environments. The place they were in, however, was completely clean. There was no doubt that a change was happening in those beings. It was as if they were adapting. The bed pressed its ears down. "Guardian, your gaze is frightening." Realizing his thoughts, Jim apologized for thinking so deeply. At least in this era, there were people living on the land that seemed no longer governed by the corruptors. This was a relief for him. Jim planned to first investigate how the people dealt with the corruptors in the current age. As for the investigation into the corruptors, he would leave that for a little later. Changing the subject, the protagonist asked Hakama to stop calling him a guardian deity. He asked her to just call him Jin. Hakama then decided, "All right, Lord Jin." The protagonist requested that she also not call him Lord. While they were eating, they heard sounds of a horse approaching. Hakama and Jin looked in the direction of the noise. The knight and the 2 women following him came closer. The man apologized for interrupting their rest. He asked if they could spare a moment. The knight's eyes fell on Jin, seeming to investigate him. The protagonist asked his identity. The knight revealed, "I am the captain of the 7th, the Royal Knights unit of the capital, Argos." The protagonist did not expect to encounter sacred knights so soon. One of the women with Argos had dog ears. She suddenly started growling and shouted at Jin, "Hey, what kind of attitude is that when speaking to the captain? At least stand up." She turned to Argos. "Captain, it is definitely them." Argos dismounted from his horse, telling Karina not to cause a commotion. He approached Jin, apologizing for having spoken to him from atop his horse. He asked if they could have a conversation. Jin questioned what the woman meant by those words, as if accusing him. Argos apologized on behalf of his subordinate. Before getting to the point, he asked where the man and the young woman were going and where they came from. It was the bed that answered, "We came from the village of Kodama, and we are going to the royal capital." Upon hearing about the village of Kodama, Karina smiled confidently. She jumped off her horse, declaring, "I still think it's them." She drew her sword, shouting, "There are no birth records of inferior species in the village of Kodama." The protagonist was surprised by how organized the country was for having birth records. Every discovery was new to him. Argos interrupted his subordinate. He looked at the young woman sitting on the ground. The clothes she wore were from the local specialty of the village of Kodama. Even in the capital, those garments were sold for a high price as high-quality clothing. He commented with a grim look, "Kodama clothes tailored for children rarely circulate. It is likely she came from the village of Kodama." Karina tried to argue, but found no words for it. It was at that moment that Argos put his hand on his sword, drawing it to point at Jin. He declared, "You are different. These clothes are not common. What country are you from?" The knight remembered that on the road from the village of Kodama to the royal capital, there had been a series of bandit attacks that used children to steal cargo. The characteristics of the criminals were identical to those two before him. The bed raised quickly. "It's not us," Argos warned. "We are the ones who will judge if they are or not." The young maga got irritated with their decision. She gathered divine power to attack if necessary. Argos faced her actions and warned, "Don't try anything you might regret." Around Hakama, numerous swords of light immediately appeared, pointing at her. Despite the threat, Argos commented, "Considering you possess divine power, you seem quite promising." The protagonist managed to understand what a sacred knight was. He faced the man pointing the sword at him, noting that he was strong. Argos then demanded, "Answer me. Where are you coming from?" He also warned, "Depending on your answer, I will eliminate you immediately." The look directed at him by Jin, at the moment those words were spoken, already indicated that the decision to confront him was extremely foolish. The two continued to stare at each other in complete silence. Jin murmured something, then sighed, responding, "I am from the village of Kodama, behind the captain of the knights." Karina scoffed. "That is a complete lie." However, contrary to what she expected, Argos retracted his sword, sheathing it. Argos looked at the bed, after removing the sword surrounding it. "You are not lying." The girl showed a complicated yet confident expression. "Jim is the guardian deity of the village of Kodama." Argos found the title the man received strange, but decided not to investigate. He turned, returning to the horse. Jim asked if he wouldn't ask anything else. The knight nodded, getting on the horse. He said goodbye. "I still have work to do. Please excuse my rudeness." Karina tried to call the commander, not believing he was giving up. Argos ignored her, asking Jim if he was going to the capital too. With the confirmation, Jim followed. He commented that they would meet again. The man said, "If you run into trouble at any time, come find me. Consider this an apology for what happened today." The commander's words scared Karina. She was ignored as Argos turned his horse around to continue the journey. He asked for permission and went down the road, leaving Karina behind. She questioned if the commander was really serious. She ran after him, leaving Dino watching the trip. Soon, she continued. 2 other riders were with them, leading the way. Karina, riding her horse next to the captain, asked excitedly, "Why are you backing off now?" She waved at the captain. No matter how we look at this situation, that inferior was clearly suspicious. There was a complicated look on Argos's face when he heard Karina call that man inferior. Argos felt as if such words were a joke. He commented with a disdainful smile, "I wonder which of us was really the inferior." Karina was surprised, not understanding what he was talking about. The second woman in the group agreed, looking at Mrs. Rhea, the woman with ears resembling fish fins. Karina was even more startled. Rhea asked if Karina had not noticed anything. There was a massive difference between the power of that person they faced and their groups. Argos went further, revealing something unexpected. "I tried to make a move 2 or 3 times. When I tried to attack, I couldn't move. My hand felt like it was being held by something. Yet, the person in front of me even had their hands in their pockets." Argos's attacks, movements, and abilities were completely nullified before he could even use them. Worried, Rhea asked the captain if he had tried to use sacred power in his attacks. Argos confirmed and revealed that he couldn't even activate his attacks. Fear and surprise emerged in Karina's eyes as she unexpectedly began to sweat. Argos revealed he had tried to use the same move. "What did you do against the girl from Kodama village, but the spirits did not lend you their strength?" Rhea followed Argos's reasoning. She revealed that she had also tried, but without success. Karina couldn't express in words what that meant. Argos made it clear. "This means there is a massive difference between our base of holy power." Argos revealed he believed that person might be stronger than the entire order of knights. Perhaps only the great commander could compare to him. The words of the captain of the 7th unit alarmed Karina and Rhea, his companions. Karina clenched her teeth. She held the horse's reins tightly, blaming herself for not noticing anything. Argos did not blame her. He knew that person was not normal. Besides, Karina had only recently joined the squad. Ria asked if the captain believed that person had solved the problem regarding the erosive in Kodama village. Argos agreed. It was a possibility. Karina was still not satisfied. She asked if they should just back away like that. Argos made his decision. I don't know their identity, but they didn't seem hostile for now. Let's just observe them. The commander warned Ria, we will return to the capital. Even though the erosive case was closed, he couldn't stay away from the capital for too long. He would leave the bandit situation for the guild to handle. While Ria scolded the rookie for her behavior, Argos had deep thoughts. He remembered how the girl had called that man the guardian deity of Kodama village. As he looked at the capital, Argos imagined that if this person became an ally, perhaps he could become the key piece to solve all the country's greatest problems. Since they had no horses, Jin and Hakama continued their journey on foot. The next day, the protagonist commented on how unexpected the previous day had been. Curiously, he asked if all the knights in the capital were as strong as those they had encountered. The bed denied it, revealing that the group they had found was special. According to the young woman, the Holy Knights were an elite group, handpicked. They were the best in the entire order. Within the group they encountered, there were two of the greatest knights. The bed tried to imitate them. The speed of summoning spirits was not the same. Their spiritual arts were on completely different levels. Confused, Jin asked what spiritual arts were. Hakama gave him an explanation. Sacred power was the strength they could borrow from the spirits. The techniques they could execute with this power were the spiritual arts. The protagonist was able to understand what she said. Basically, the nanomachines were being treated as spirits. In this era, science was treated merely as fantasy. It had not yet been rediscovered. What kept him pondering was the attitude of the knight with fox ears. She had called him inferior the night before. Jin murmured, "Still an inferior, huh?" Hakama looked at him, curious. The protagonist laughed, commenting on how there seemed to be various races in this era. The girl responded, giving some examples. Some races resembled fish, others insects. Hakama revealed that her grandmother used to say that habitats, long ago, were limited like the seas and forests. Because of this, changes in bodies occurred, so they could adapt and find a place to live. Jin was surprised to discover such evolution based on the environment. This meant that these survivors from 100 million years ago had become evolved humans. He decided not to think too much about it and just accept it. Jin managed to discover a few more things. Those who did not change are called inferiors, right? Hakama agreed. Society looked down on the inferiors, those who had not adapted to the environment. Because of this, they were left behind. It revealed that most of the captured and sold servants were also inferior. The protagonist felt dismay upon realizing that there was slavery in that future. Hakama was quick to say, "But there is not a big difference between us just because some are a little different. They treat them this way. This is totally wrong." The girl huffed irritably and received a compliment from Jin as they walked together. Someone appeared on the dirt road, walking with the help of a cane. A weak voice pleaded, "Please help me!" The young man walking towards them could no longer bear to walk and fell to the ground. Hakama ran towards him to help and noticed his ears. The protagonist observed the young man's ears. They were perfectly normal, like those of unevolved humans. The girl lying on the ground was covered in wounds. Worried, Hakama approached her. The young villager supported the injured girl, trying to wake her up. As soon as she woke up and saw the unfamiliar man approaching, the young woman went on high alert. Jin stopped when the girl moved, shouting, "Don't move!" She grabbed Hakama, warning, "If you come closer, I will finish him." Jin avoided escalating the situation. He understood that the girl was a decoy and warned Hakama, "We fell into a trap." Looking around, Jin expected the others to approach. On the path that Jin and Hakama had taken, someone with the ability of invisibility appeared, carrying a sword. He revealed himself, praising the girl with a smile. "You did well, Poirot. You followed the orders perfectly." Jin did not expect to find people so capable of using camouflage, especially if they were bandits. The camouflage was used by capturing images of the user's surroundings and using nanomachines to reproduce them, making the user invisible. The downside was that movement would disrupt the camouflage, but the bandits in front of Jin used it skillfully. The leader of the bandits pointed the sword at him. He asked where he was from since he wore fine clothes for someone inferior. Even with the sword aimed at him, Jin showed no reaction. Hakama was worried about him as the bandit leader threatened him. Suddenly, Hakama used her divine power, but Jin shouted her name, telling her to stop. That power should not be used against people. Do you understand that? You are not desperate. Hakama wanted to go against Jin's words, but she didn't know what to do. The bandit leader, on the other hand, was pleased to find someone with divine power. One of his subordinates asked Jin if he could also use divine power. The protagonist gave a provoking answer. Who knows? This enraged the pointed-eared man, who kicked him to the ground. Jin did not resist, pretending to be weak as he fell. The arrogant man warned, Don't let this go to your head, inferior species. The gang leader warned his subordinate not to damage the goods, but he did not believe that an inferior species would sell well anyway. He didn't even believe there was a possibility for a human to have divine power. Hakama, under the threat from the girl named Puaro, heard the conversation. She realized these were the bandits mentioned by the knights. A bandit walked towards her and used a lightning power. Time to sleep, Hakama. Even knowing she couldn't allow herself to be captured, she couldn't do anything to resist. Hours later, Jin woke up. Hakama, the girl, opened her eyes and sat up desperately on the cage floor. The protagonist asked if she was okay. The girl nodded and asked something more important. Where are we? The protagonist looked around at the various other cages and revealed that they were in the base of the guys who attacked them. There were many other people who had also been captured. The people in the cages were weak, fearful, and hopeless. Hakama looked at that scene alongside Jin. She then realized he was once again without clothes. The protagonist responded brilliantly. They took my clothes because they were different. At least they left me my underwear. The bed rolled its eyes, questioning how he was so relaxed. He had spent most of his life without clothes. Jin was quite used to it. Putting that topic aside, Hakama asked why he hadn't faced the bandits. He could easily defeat them. The protagonist remained silent. Hakama had not yet discovered the answer. At that moment, the basement door was opened. A guard ordered Puaro to enter. Hakama frowned with irritation upon seeing her. Puaro was carrying 2 loaves of bread. She approached, surprised to see the two already awake. The bed gripped the bars of the cage in great anger. Puaro looked down with a look of regret. I never expected to be forgiven. Anyway, the bed bared its teeth, showing its anger. Jin, sitting on the floor, commented with a smile, You are so good. Hearing him, the young girl was surprised. Jin revealed why he thought that way. A true villain wouldn't stop to think about being hated or forgiven. The protagonist stood up. After speaking, he approached the cage's bars, gripping them tightly. Puaro was startled by what she saw. The bars simply melted, disappearing in an instant. The protagonist wiped his hands and stepped out of the cage. He revealed what he had been waiting for the girl for here, no one would hear them. Puaro was surprised to be asked about something a stranger shouldn't know. Your precious person, where is she? Alert, Puaro questioned how he had discovered that. With healing energy in his hand, Jin approached her. He claimed to have only guessed. She had deceived him at first because of her wounds, but even villains shouldn't hit their companions so brutally. The energy in Jin's hand flowed through the girl's body, healing each of her wounds. That's how he revealed he had discovered that she must have been threatened to follow orders. Puaro clasped his hands together. He displayed a look of despair. She revealed what had happened. My brother! They took him. They said that if I challenged them, they would send my brother abroad. We would be separated for the rest of our lives. Puaro's parents were taken by the criminals. They were the only family of the little brother. The young girl wanted to protect him at least. That's why she had accepted those orders. Fury ignited in the protagonist's dark gaze. The bed finally realized, You allowed yourself to be captured to save them, revealing that this was partially the reason. He commented, Villains are annoying and persistent like weeds. If they escape, they will cause trouble. That's why we need to uproot them. Everything seemed calm outside the underground. The guard even yawned until he heard a noise. Before he could check, the door had been kicked in on him. Emerging from the underground prison, he was now ready to take down all those criminals, completely. 100 million years ago, cities were extremely developed. Skies filled with lights and advertisements, roads and bridges passed overhead, even over the buildings. In that setting, a young boy who didn't even have the right to cleanliness dreamed of justice. He watched police shows and the advertisements scattered across the streets. However, that boy soon noticed that a world in need of justice was filled with trash called humans. He wished he could have lived a normal life, but the environment he grew up in wouldn't allow him to receive that. That's why that boy, hunted by criminals, crushed both them and his fate. Throughout his youth, he grew until he was above those who should be targets of justice. One day, then, that young man heard a scientist say, You were born in the wrong world. Now, in the future, Jin walked through the criminal's base. Dragging one of them by the hair, 2 thugs appeared in the hallway. Stop right there! However, they too were taken down, joining the others. With each thug that fell, screams of fear erupted against Jin's attacks. He grinned with excitement. Before throwing one thug on top of 2 others in his path, the thug he threw landed on a companion. Jin moved quickly, striking the other with a punch. Fear appeared in the thug's eyes. Against the punch, he was thrown against a door, collapsing upon hitting it. Jin walked toward the thug sprawled on the floor. The man was startled, and his scream of desperation echoed throughout the building, reaching even the basement. Puaru recognized those screams. She ran to Rakama to ask, "Who is that?" Uninterested, Rakama replied without much enthusiasm, "A guardian deity." Puaru was surprised by the answer. Rakama advised, "Leave this to Jin. He will handle everything." She followed the other prisoners, remembering what Jin had said they should do, go outside. Puaru wondered if they could really be saved. Inside her, there was much fear regarding the thug leader. He possessed considerable sacred power. There would be no way for Jin to win with just brute strength. At that moment, the very thug leader Puaru feared sat on the ground with a frightened expression. Before him, Jin held the thug who had thrown him down earlier, lifting him by the head. The thug leader stammered, "What do you want? Money, or perhaps some servants?" He pointed to a cage where dirty children slept. The thug wanted to trade all of them for his survival. One of the children there caught Jin's attention. She looked very much like Puaru. Dropping the thug to the ground, Jin turned to the leader. "Have you just finished speaking?" The thug didn't understand what was happening. He couldn't even use sacred magic. Jin walked toward the frightened thug. He wondered what power the powerful man had. Jim suddenly commented, "What you want is to be a good villain. True villains would flee immediately. Guys like you start by underestimating their opponents. Are you sure you will win? That's why you start begging the moment you begin to lose the battle." The thug, Rani, showed his teeth. He cursed the situation he was in, with no chance of winning. He got up, running in one direction of the room, not considering surrender. He pulled a lever. A door opened. There was a cage with a powerful humanoid monster. Muscles bulged all over its body. Its mouth opened like a flower, filled with rows of teeth and horns. The protagonist didn't expect to see a corruptor in that place. The thug had kept such a being as a last resort. He laughed confidently. "This is going to make a mess of you." The monster approached, roaring furiously. In its dark mouth, a point of light that detected the enemy was directed toward Jin. The corruptor raised one of its arms, descending upon the protagonist. Jin raised his fists, blocking the attack, using only his own strength. The thug, who had been laughing just a second ago, showed confusion in his eyes while blocking the monster's fist. Jim commented, "Did you know I was born with superhuman physique compared to a normal person? Apparently, I have many more fibers in my muscles." In the next instant, he kicked the corruptor, knocking it to the ground, not needing to hold back against a monster. Jim extended his hand forward. From his palm, an energy cannon was launched, evaporating the corruptor. Only chunks of the monster fell to the ground. The thug tried to retreat, but behind him was a wall. Against someone who could also use magic and was even stronger than him, there was no escape. Jim spread his fingers and moved closer, asking, "What are you going to do now as a last request?" The bandit asked him to spare his life. Jim's response came with a heavy punch. "I can't." Jim recovered his clothes and put them on. He looked at the trapped children. He asked them to wait a little longer. He would free them soon. Puaro's brother and the other children smiled through tears. They saw hope return. There was information Jin needed to uncover. He approached the bandit leader's table, looking for evidence of the crimes. In a drawer, Jin found some suspicious papers. Every word he read was more shocking than the last. Smiling softly, Jin realized he might have found what he was looking for. However, Jin did not understand that written language. This made him realize he would need to ask Hakama to teach him how to read it. The protagonist walked toward the monster he had destroyed. He wondered what the bandits planned by capturing those erosives. To find out, he used energy to communicate with the nanotechnology in the area. He accessed their cameras. Numerous windows with images appeared. Jin scrolled back to the footage from a week ago. The result was astonishing. The bandit leader was speaking to someone he called Lord. "What do you plan by capturing this?" The man, dressed as a noble, walked around the erosive cage with a smile. He warned, "You don't need to know this, but I will tell you something very soon. Something interesting is going to happen on this continent." The protagonist watched the images attentively. He absorbed every bit of information. Soon, several people began to appear around the small village. Guild members arrived to arrest the bandits. They came to rescue the people who had been captured by them. Poirot stayed in a corner with the bed. His expression was worried, but it changed to relief upon seeing his brother Nino. The young boy with blue hair ran toward his sister. The two embraced, relieving the longing and worry they had felt. Tears streamed down their cheeks. Relieved by the reunion, Poirot firmly thanked Jin. "Deity, thank you very much." The protagonist stated he was not a divine entity. However, he thanked her, asking her not to mind. Changing the subject, he looked around. "Are the people who are capturing these bandits affiliated with this territory?" Hakama approached, revealing that they were guild members. She was the one who called them. There was a man among them, of goat descent, with curled horns and a large beard. He was the guild master of the city. The man noticed Jin's gaze and walked towards him. "Did you handle this situation?" Upon hearing the confirmation, the man bowed slightly. "I am Padarako, the guild master. You have my deepest gratitude for your cooperation." Like Padarako, the other guild members also bowed in thanks. Jin raised his gaze, analyzing the man before him. The young man had defeated numerous enemies. He did not have a single scratch. Although he appeared to be of inferior species, Padarako's intuition told him he was not an ordinary man. The man with goat horns commented that they had received several reports regarding the incidents in the area. They were already facing endless requests to subjugate bandits. Hearing this, Jin remarked, "So it's not the local lord who commands the forces to capture them, right?" The man almost laughed. "You must be joking. A lord does not have that level of authority." Padarako revealed that the only ones dealing with such crimes were the guild members who swore loyalty to the king. He explained, "Even if the lord of this land, Lord Champion, committed a crime, we would be obligated to report him to the king, although I highly doubt such a thing will ever happen." Jin understood the city's structure. The lord was like the mayor, and the guild was like the police. However, Champion must be the corrupt one he had seen in the recordings. The protagonist handed over some documents to Padarako. Imagining that they would be useful, the guild leader was surprised. There was a list of individuals who conducted deals with the bandits. It was surprising, because with that, they could arrest all of them. Jim asked if the local lord's name was on the papers. Padarako asked him not to make jokes. It was impossible for that to happen. The protagonist understood what kind of villain he was facing this time. There was nothing he could do about it at the moment. Remembering a more important matter, he approached Puaro. Jin asked Padarako what would happen to the freed slaves. The man revealed that, for those with search requests, they would take responsibility for returning them to their homes. However, they could not do much for those who were not included on the list. R and Inino looked down sadly. Remembering that those siblings had lost their parents, he asked the guild leader if there was no shelter or something similar. Adarako denied it. They could serve as mediators to help in some way, such as finding work. But since the two youths were of an inferior species, he did not think they would be able to get anything good. Seeing how they used the term inferior species even within the city, Jin sighed. He wanted to help Puaru and his brother somehow, but he could not find a way to do so. It was then that he thought of something. He remembered a place where they could go and asked if they would like to try. Nino nodded quickly, while Puaru asked where they could go. The protagonist remembered Argos's words. He had said that he would help with whatever was asked. Associating it with him, Jin imagined a perfect place where the youths could stay. At that exact moment, Argos arrived at the royal capital, Kermosia. The knight suddenly shivered, drawing Ria's attention. What happened? He merely stated that he had felt a sudden chill. Argos got down from his horse, warning that they had already gone too far with the expedition, since it had become so long. He thanked everyone. He asked them to go rest. Then, he entered the palace. In front of him, carrying a leather bag, he was attended by butlers. Additionally, maids bowed to receive him. Argos asked a butler if any report had arrived. The man glanced sideways at a maid. She had a complicated expression. Sighing, Argos asked if something had happened. The butler bowed, apologizing for disturbing him. As he had returned and approached, he whispered something. On the second floor, there was a young blonde woman dressed in noble attire. She had her arms crossed and a grim look. She was watching him. Argos nodded to the butler, thanking him for the report, and dismissed him. Sighing, Argos acknowledged that the situation was worse than he had imagined. He could not believe that an erosive had even appeared in the capital. He wondered how such a thing could have happened. It seemed obvious, and Argos treated it as such. Someone must have intentionally allowed the monster to enter the capital. What made him suspect even more was how those he cared about refused stubbornly to let anyone into the Harnix Academy. While he thought about obtaining allies as quickly as possible, Argos did not imagine that the perfect people were heading towards him. 3 days after the subjugation of the bandits, Jin and the young ones were still marching towards the capital with worry. Puaro asked if Jin was sure he could find a job in the royal capital. The protagonist told her not to worry. "You can read and write, Puaro. You can even do math. You will definitely find something. Have more confidence in yourself." The girl smiled, showing confidence. Hakama called out to the protagonist, pointing to the end of the road. From where they were, they could already see the buildings. When they climbed to the top of a hill, the group could see the royal capital perfectly. It was already late afternoon when they entered the capital. In the first commercial streets, people were walking everywhere. Some people carried boxes with supplies. The air was impressed with how vivid the place was. Hakama explained that the capital relied heavily on imports. Therefore, goods from various regions could be found there. She reminded Jin how the people of Kodama village often sold their specialties. The clothes in the capital were varied, and the protagonist was fascinated, looking around. He managed to see different people. Some had insect-like characteristics, while others vaguely resembled fishmen. The city also appeared quite clean, and public safety was solid, as people walked freely. However, Jin noticed something. In a corner of that same street, there were beggars in precarious conditions. This revealed how, in all eras, there were persistent problems. Returning to what mattered, the protagonist asked Hakama when her classes at the Harnish Academy would start. The girl revealed that they would begin only the following week. As they moved to another area, a young blonde girl who vaguely heard the conversation stopped and glared at Hakama with a frown. She couldn't believe that a child like her, walking with an inferior kind, would go to the academy. Sometime later, Jin's group arrived at an inn. Hakama and Nino joyfully jumped onto the soft bed. The protagonist sat on the bed beside them, commenting on how they could finally sleep in a decent place. Having finally arrived in the capital, he wondered what he should do next. Even with the bag of money he had, he would still need more to survive. They had received a reward for subduing the bandits, but the gold coins would not last forever. Moreover, there was still the need to find a place where Puaro could work. Finding that night would be the fastest way. However, without any connection, it would be difficult to even find him. The protagonist thought for a moment and decided to conduct an investigation. About the corruptors that existed in that era, it was necessary, especially since there were individuals who used such monsters for vile purposes. The corruptors were a great threat. Jim did not intend to let them roam freely in this world. He refused to allow the terror he experienced in his original era to repeat itself. Going to the window, he looked at the activity in the street. Then, he spoke to Hakama again. He asked what people in the country did when they wanted to research something. The young woman explained that they could ask a guide or read books. However, she revealed that books were expensive. Even in the village of Kodama, they needed to share the few they had. Hakama reminded him that the capital had a library. He might be able to search for what he wanted there. The protagonist thought about it. It seemed quite convenient. He could take advantage of it. It might even be possible to find clues about the research units left by Kagura. However, when they arrived at the library, they were stopped from entering by a young woman with feathered ears. She smiled as she said, "I'm sorry, but you do not have permission to use this facility." According to her, the books were considered national property. It was not possible to enter freely. She explained that access was restricted to students whose skills had been recognized by the academy, as well as nobles within the royal capital. Hakama reminded the protagonist that he still could not read. Even having been taught by Hakama and Puaro, Jin was still far from having perfect comprehension. While he thought about what to do, two shadows approached. Two hooded men moved closer, confirming their targets. One of them approached Jin. "Do you have a minute?" As soon as the protagonist turned, the man attacked him with a punch. The protagonist grabbed his hand and squeezed, showing an irritated look. "What a great welcome! And I thought the public safety here was good." The man who attacked him smiled, taunting. "That's where you were wrong." The man's hand shone with a deep golden light. At that very instant, Dinha pushed up to the sky. A ray of light was shot out, exploding above the city. The man waved his hand, commenting, "You have sharp instincts, partner." Poaru and his brother were shocked. That person was using divine power in the middle of the city. Jim calmly asked what the two attacking him wanted. The man who tried to hit him with a punch revealed that they had decided he was a nuisance. Discovering that the duo had been hired by someone, Jim realized how much this would actually help him. The man who attacked him provoked again. "If you just disappear from the royal capital, you won't have to worry about danger every day. Do you understand?" The companion beside him laughed mockingly. The protagonist refused. "I'll think about it when things really get dangerous." Confidently, the man attacked again, but his wrist was seized by Jin, and with sheer force, he was thrown to the ground. The impact nearly made him faint. His companion went on high alert and used fire magic to attack Jin from behind. The protagonist simply turned around, and with a wave of his hand, the flames were blocked. The man thought the flames had consumed his enemy, thanks to the smoke curtain that appeared. But from inside it, Jin's hand emerged, grabbing him too. The protagonist lifted the man by holding his shirt and warned, "If you want to seem like a threat, come back when you're stronger." Clenching his other fist, Jin concluded, "I recommend you only return if you really have the courage to challenge me." The man trembled subconsciously, not understanding why someone theoretically inferior was so strong. At that moment, a woman's voice arose. "Enough! Nobody move!" A knight with dog ears approached irritably. "Well, my day off, and to make it worse, I come across a fight in the middle of the city. She pointed the spear at those involved in the commotion. I will throw all of you in jail. Get ready. It was then that she recognized Jin and Hakama and was startled. The protagonist dropped the fire magic man on the ground, commenting to the knight, "Looks like causing a scene worked after all." Karina pointed at him angrily. "You are the inferior kind from the other day." Karina's shout drew the attention of everyone around. She looked at Jin with a satisfied gaze. Similarly, she pointed the spear at him. "You are audacious. You came to the capital and immediately started a fight. As expected, an inferior kind is just an inferior kind. There are things you should and shouldn't do." While she vociferated all her prejudice, a rabbit woman approached carefully. She called out to the knight to explain the situation. "I was passing by and saw everything. Actually, these people were attacked, so I believe it was self-defense." Karina was taken aback upon hearing the woman. She moved closer to the fallen men on the ground and recognized them. "You are students from Harnish Academy, right?" Exhaustedly placing her hand on her head, she sighed. "As I thought. I hoped that lady wouldn't get involved in this." Jin approached, questioning who she was talking about. Karina handed the two students over to guild members who took them away. Jin teased her. "So, do knights also do patrols? I thought that was the guild's job." Irritated, Karina avoided eye contact, explaining that they helped maintain public order since the capital was so big. Despite saying that, she concealed the fact that she was only looking for some snacks to eat. She looked back at Jin, realizing how strong he was, as the students he took down were not weak. Karina said goodbye, telling him not to cause trouble in the capital. The protagonist replied, explaining that he would like her to take him to a certain place. The knight Francius asked where he was going. It was already dark when they arrived at Argos's mansion. Sitting on a couch, Jim asked, "Hire us. When we met, you said I could visit you if I needed help." Argos never expected that this meeting would happen so soon. He saw that there were two other children next to Jim. "There were not just two of you last time," Jim explained. "We found the bandits you warned us to be careful about. We were captured, but we ended up rescuing these two." Argos was surprised. Karina next to him gritted her teeth upon hearing about the bandits. Argos asked what Jim had done with them. The protagonist revealed that he had disarmed the gang and handed them over to the guild. The knight nodded, feeling satisfied inside. The captain wondered if the man had fought the bandits alone. Curious, he asked why Jim had helped the girl and her brother. Jim explained that they had no family and were what they called inferior. The protagonist explained that he at least wanted to help them find work. Still surprised, Argos asked if Jim had any obligation to take care of those two. His answer was simple. "That's how I do things. No matter how it happened, I saved them. In this case, I won't do it halfway. I will go all the way." Karina rolled her eyes upon hearing this. Meanwhile, the captain of the 7th Cavalry was impressed. Aro and the little brother were excited to see Jim's kindness. Argos then nodded. "Very well, they can live and work here in the mansion." Before the duo could get excited, Argos continued, "However, I have one condition." He turned to Jim and asked, "I want you to be an instructor." Minutes later, Poirot was already dressed in a maid's dress, and her little brother in a suit. The bed was impressed by the two. Jim crossed his arms, satisfied. Poirot quickly bowed to Argos, thanking him deeply. He asked her not to thank him and handed them over to the head butler and the maid. Chief, to be trained, asking not to be discriminated against simply for being inferior, Jim and Hakama then followed Argos to another room. After saying goodbye, following Argos, the protagonist asked what was up with the offer for him to be an instructor, even not knowing Jin's background. Argos stated he wanted to confirm that he was a good person, which is why he had made the request. "I want you to conduct an investigation at Harnish Academy." The protagonist asked what was happening. According to Argos, the country was currently being targeted by several factions seeking supremacy. Confused, Jin questioned if there wasn't a king in the country. The knight explained that the king was bedridden due to illness and didn't have much time left. Because of this, the struggle for succession had already begun behind the scenes. However, there was a problem. Those not intending to claim the throne were attacking the kingdom. They used infiltrators and involved innocents in their evil plans. Jin was able to understand Argos's words. This showed that it wasn't just that local Lord Champion who needed to be watched. The captain continued, "Dangerous people like these are lurking and operating in the shadows here in the capital. We must uncover their hideout as soon as possible." Wondering if the most suspicious place was Harnish Academy, the protagonist received confirmation. When they arrived at a room, Argos knocked on the door and announced, "I'm coming in." There was someone inside the room. Argos informed Jin that she would guide him inside the academy. "Let me introduce you to my younger sister, Milia Olton." As soon as Argos entered the room to introduce Jin to his sister, she stood up, interrupting, with a fan in front of her mouth. "Brother, You can't be saying you're leaving the infiltration mission you mentioned the other day for this inferior. Argos promptly warned his sister that she was being rude. Milia ignored him, continuing with the insults. How rude! It is the very existence of that inferior. She is not the girl with a countryside face, she is a thing. But this is not a job for a mere inferior. Jeans mocked her words. You are quite discriminatory, miss. Sighing, Argo apologized on behalf of his sister. Karina approached the protagonist. She whispered that Milia had always been this way. He, however, saw Karina as not much different. Milia pointed the fan at her brother, warning, "This is not just an infiltration mission. He must fulfill the duties of an instructor as well." Arrogantly, she claimed she did not believe an inferior could become an instructor. "Do you have the necessary qualifications for that?" Hakama answered for him. Jin cannot read. The protagonist sighed upon hearing her. When Milia heard the response, she mocked him. Then he is completely out of the question. The bed then concluded its reply. But there are many things only Jin can teach. He is much more incredible than any of us. Milia fell silent and analyzed the man before her. Arrogantly, she ignored him. Come on, we'll see if he has enough strength to keep the students in line. Before leaving the room, she warned, but being a student requires much more than just brute strength. Thus, they were left alone. After Milia left, her brother held his head, sighing. Karina imitated his gesture. Sighing, I knew that lady was behind the incident in the city. Apologizing to Jin once again, Argo assured him that he would talk to his sister by the end of the day. Getting to the main topic, the protagonist asked, what exactly did Argo want him to teach in the role of instructor? The knight captain revealed, you will teach magical arts. Based on my assessment, you are highly skilled in spiritual arts, am I right? The protagonist asked, somewhat more interested. He wanted to know what parts of the spiritual arts should be taught. Argo explained that it would be just the basics: ignition, discharge, freezing, and healing. If he could perform at least 2 of these 4 basic spiritual arts, it would already be enough. The protagonist asked, slightly disappointed, is that all? On the other hand, Argos was surprised, but that was already quite something. Don't tell me you can use the special spiritual arts that only a handful of people can materialize. Thinking about the question, the protagonist recalled the bandits he faced. From what Argos said, they were the elite bandits of that era. Things seemed more interesting now. Jin then assured, I think I will need to turn the common sense of this era upside down. A week later, the day of the entrance exam of the Harnisk Academy arrived. The academy, with large buildings resembling stone castles, covered a vast area of the city. At the entrance of the academy, several teachers awaited the students taking the entrance exam. One of these students was Hakama. She headed to the room where she would take the exam and answered with dedication. In another area of the academy, a fat and bald teacher walked down the hallway, guiding the 2 guests behind him. He welcomed Argos and the man behind him. Even among the holy knights, I imagine the 7th unit is especially busy. Argos assured him that he didn't need to worry as it was their turn now. The protagonist approached Argos, asking what he meant. The knight revealed that once a year, the holy knights took turns appointing someone as the special instructor of the academy. This year, the responsibility belonged to the 7th unit. Internally, the protagonist wondered if Argos truly believed they would accept him. While Jin was thinking, the bald teacher looked at him grimly from the corner of his eye. When they reached the administration room, the bald teacher indicated the way. Upon opening the door, he saw a man standing and a woman sitting and warned, the principal and the others are waiting for us. Sitting in the principal's chair was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a sharp gaze. Argos approached, bowing to greet her. It has been a while, principal. The woman replied, we haven't seen each other since you graduated as the best in your class. You've built a great reputation in such a short time. She thanked Argos for his cooperation and ensured she was merely doing her duty. Leaning back in her chair, the principal revealed that she had heard some rumors. Argos was not only dealing with the erosives, he was also being pulled into the internal faction conflicts. Argos listened attentively in silence. The principal continued, it's understandable that you cannot spare manpower. I'm sure you already have a lot of work ahead. Her voice had a slight tone of warning. Still, it doesn't mean you can treat this academy so lightly. She looked at the protagonist, questioning the knight. You're not really planning to make this man an instructor here, are you? Jim was being watched with eyes of disdain, mockery, and rejection by the principal and the 2 teachers close to her. While Jim remained silent, Argos responded, don't worry, he is more exceptional than anyone in our 7th unit. Argos threw a lifeline that the teachers could cling to. At least he is the best when it comes to combat skills. The principal did not insist. If you say so, I believe it must be true. She then asked what the teachers thought. One of the teachers immediately stepped forward, opposing the idea. He pointed at Jin. An inferior species teaching in this traditional and sacred academy is completely unprecedented. The teacher slammed his hand on the table, raging. This position is not suitable for someone of an inferior species. Are you trying to make us a laughingstock? Setting aside the teacher with wolf ears, the principal addressed the fat, bald teacher. We have heard Professor Gita's opinion. What do you think? Rudman the professor scratched his beard. He showed an expression of little interest and responded, I agree with him. Many students here are of noble birth. He explained why. If an inferior species teaches them, there will inevitably be a reaction from the students and the instructors too. After the professor's response, the principal stated she felt the same. However, she still wanted to hear what the candidate for professor had to say. She turned to Jin, who stepped forward, stopping in front of the desk. The protagonist bowed slightly, introducing himself. I apologize for the late introduction. I came from the Kodama village. My name is Jin Shidu. The principal was a bit surprised to see him so calm, even after all the insults directed at him. The protagonist claimed to understand the concerns, but warned, I would like to ask you something. Am I unfit to be an instructor because I am of an inferior species or because I lack the necessary skill? The question caught both the professors and the principal off guard. However, she had an answer. The latter. Obviously, your origin does not matter as long as you have the skill. She asked if he could prove that he possessed the skills he claimed to have. Argos did not let this opportunity pass. He offered a trial. In that case, why not test him? A few minutes later, they headed to the martial arts training center. It was an arena located in the area behind the school, near mountains and forests. The professor with wolf ears opened his arms, warning, Since today is the entrance exam, there are many students around. This means you won't be embarrassed in front of everyone. It was evident in the look of the professor what his intentions were. The protagonist did not care much about him. He simply waited. The principal, in the center of the arena, informed the two, The rules are simple. You will fight only with spiritual arts. She specified this particularly for Jin. After all, you are trying to become an instructor of spiritual arts. The best way to judge your skills is to see them in action. At first, there were numerous students in the corridors near the arena. They were wondering what was happening. One of them answered their friend's question. They said there would be a simulated battle or something like that. Milha was close to these students, just observing and listening. The newcomers were impressed. It was the first time they saw Instructor Gita actually fight. On the other hand, Jin sighed lightly while waiting. The principal joined Professor Rudman and Argos, crossing her arms. She commented with a disdainful look. Well, let's see how much an inferior species can really do. Argos remained silent. He wanted to observe closely. This would be the first time he would truly see Jin fight. Inferior species had low physical abilities. Even the divine power they possessed was released in lesser amounts. Argos hoped that at least his judgment would not be wrong. In the arena, Professor Gita asked if Jin was ready. Before the protagonist could respond, the professor continued. Well, let's begin. He smiled wickedly. In that instant, he conjured a large fireball to attack. First, the protagonist dodged the attack. The explosion occurred exactly where he had been just a second before. The students were impressed by the attack. Gita noticed their presence and felt even more powerful. The professor raised his hand, gathering a huge amount of lightning that transformed into arrows. They flew towards Jin, who continued to dodge. The explosions didn't even come close to him. However, as he jumped, the lightning arrows surrounded him in midair. Internally, Gita mocked him. An inferior being could only flee, ultimately falling into his trap. Although he was not a holy knight, Gita bragged about graduating as the top student in his class after the lightning attacks. He launched another fireball. He was confident that this was someone an inferior enemy could not defeat. He dodged each attack while analyzing them. Jin felt a little disappointed. He had been told that this power should not be used against people. However, he saw no other alternative. Because of the assessment, the protagonist extended his hand. He gathered the nanomachines in the air. They clustered together, forming a spatial shadow. With a sharp look, he warned, I will show you a small portion of this power. Shadow rays began to emerge around Professor Dita. A gravitational field was formed, slamming the professor to the ground with tremendous force. The ground beneath him started to crack due to the weight. The director and Professor Rudman were surprised. They never expected something like this. They had never seen anything like it before. Argos, eager to see the abilities of the one he had faith in, stood with his mouth agape. Emilia, who doubted Jin's capabilities, widened her eyes in complete shock. On the ground, Professor Gita wondered what was happening. He could not move or rise, being crushed by the air. The protagonist walked towards him, explaining what was happening. I just adjusted the gravity around you a little. Is this a spiritual art you have never seen before? and he received no answer, which indicated one thing. It seems I have much to teach at this academy, not just to the students, but to you, professors as well. After holding Professor Dita for a while, Jin extended his fingers and freed him. When he managed to stand up, the professor shouted, "Hey, what did you do?" The protagonist replied without much fuss, "I used spiritual arts. What else?" The professor was enraged. He had never heard or seen arts like those. He accused Jin of using some cowardly trick. While they watched Professor Gita lose control, the director delivered her verdict. That concludes everything. Argos agreed with her. The students who watched the fight were impressed. Melia was shocked. What she saw was, without a doubt, special spiritual arts. Deep in thought, she wondered how someone of an inferior species, with almost no spiritual power, demonstrated something that even those protected by spirits could not achieve. With a furrowed brow, she questioned who that guy was. A week went by, and the start of classes finally began. In an auditorium, the principal was giving her speech to the newcomers. The bed was among the students after being approved. Next to her was a new friend with rabbit ears. After explaining that the academy was a place to create warriors who would fight against the erosives, she assured them, "If you reach graduation, even if you join the Holy Knights, it will not just be a dream. Everything depends on your abilities." In the box above, the senior students could see there were many newcomers. Someone approached Melia, waving at her. A young man with lion ears and hair red as a mane. Melia recognized him. His name was Lias. He approached because it was rare to see Melia at ceremonies, as she never seemed to be interested in others. Melia returned the comment, asking about him. Lias revealed that he would like to have newcomers who drew attention by his side. While looking down at the floor below, he was surprised to see the unexpected. Why was there an inferior species sitting in the instructor's section? The answer given by Melia was obvious. Because he is an instructor. Lias was shocked to hear his classmate. Melia asked what he thought. The only answer Lias could give was the cliché. "Even if you ask me, he is just an inferior." Melia was convinced of the same fact. "I believe so." The protagonist noticed he was being watched. He looked around as well. The academy was vast, and investigating it would take some time. The looks he received were painful. To avoid issues, it would be necessary to dispel the image created about the inferior species. With so much attention, investigation would be impossible. He would become the most suspicious person in the academy. Sometime later, the first class began in a room that resembled a small auditorium. Professor Dita stood behind the podium with Jim nearby. Dita started the class. The few students needed to stay focused to ensure the newcomers didn't surpass them. For you, in the elite class, this topic may be irrelevant, or so I would like to say. Showing irritation, the professor shouted, "Why are there so few students today? Are you lacking motivation?" Seeing the students' disinterest, Dita actually felt satisfaction. He knew that no one would want to listen to a class from an inferior species. That is why he had spread the word beforehand that one of them would be in charge of the class. After doing his part, Dita stepped aside for Jin to introduce himself. Approaching the podium, the new teacher said, "Jin Shidu, regarding spiritual arts, I have been tasked with teaching you. For now, I look forward to working with you." Elias was the first to question whether he could actually do his job. The protagonist smiled, letting him decide that. "If you feel that attending my class has no value, you can simply leave." Elias did not expect that response. He had spoken calmly until that moment. Jin warned, "However, there is one thing I want you to remember. Do not use this power against other people. The spiritual arts have the power to inhibit the regeneration of the erosives, but this inhibition does not trigger against the human body. It would only cause an injury." Explaining why, he said, "Because this power was specifically created to defeat the erosives." Jin made a plea for the students not to misuse that power. One student, however, mocked such words. "You're an idiot. Power is power." He leaned back in his seat, almost putting his feet on the table. "I came to see what kind of lecture an inferior species would give. What do I gain by not using spiritual arts? You simply don't want to compare because you are an inferior and powerless species, right?" Other students started laughing upon hearing their classmate speak. The protagonist noticed that no one there respected him. After thinking about what to do, he sighed lightly and challenged, "If you think you have no power, you are welcome to test it." The young man didn't expect to hear that. He challenged, "Use the strongest power you can and throw it at me," he assured, without worrying. "If you can even leave a scratch on me, I promise to never show up here again." The student enjoyed hearing such words and climbed onto the podium, creating a spear of lightning. "Don't regret your words later." An inferior being, Gita was startled to see the young man preparing the attack, fearing he might be hit too. The arrogant student threw the lightning spear at Jin, who didn't even move. The impact created a cloud of dust and debris. Unable to see the teacher anymore, the young man smiled confidently. In the next moment, through the smoke curtain, a dagger flew toward him, cutting the hair above his ear and embedding itself in the wall behind him. The young man looked back, frightened. Jin delivered a few words. "Imagine if I wanted to. You wouldn't even be alive now." With a barrier around him, the protagonist advised him, "Judging people by their appearance can be fatal." Lias, one of those who had questioned him, wanted to understand if what was used were spiritual arts. As fear settled among the students, Jin continued, "You are an inferior species. If you truly are inferior, but I am stronger than you, then call me your teacher." Continuing with the lesson, the protagonist asked if everyone knew the conditions to activate the spiritual arts. He let the one who attacked him try to answer. The student replied quickly, "It's not about an image. You increase your divine power." And then he transmits the power he visualized to the spirits to give form to it. This is basic, right? The protagonist confirmed that creating an image was important, but that was not the activation condition. Activating the powers through his hand, he explained that the spirits received wavelengths from nanomachines. They could not manifest their power for the first time before that. The student was confused upon hearing about wavelengths. Continuing, Dinho stated there were 8 wavelengths. He demonstrated each of them: ignition, discharge, healing, freezing. These were the ones the students should be most familiar with. However, in front of everyone, he added a few more: gravitational manipulation, light manipulation, and atmospheric pressure manipulation. Finally, he mentioned what he used to block the attack: spatial protection. The professor's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. His jaw dropped when he saw Jin demonstrate proficiency in 8 types of spiritual arts. The protagonist created a small arrow of lightning, just as he had shaped his discharge into a spear, and he launched it. The image becomes vital. Having said that, Jin asked if they could finally start the class. At the end of the day, after the class, Jin walked through the outer corridors of the academy while thinking about continuing the investigation. The students began to notice his presence. Rumors were already spreading about the class he had taught. The protagonist looked around, unaware of the topic they were discussing, while trying to find a place that seemed suspicious. While thinking about looking for a location where the students didn't go, he ended up crossing paths with Milha. Their eyes met for a moment. As Jin passed her, Milha questioned him, "Who are you exactly?" The protagonist teased, asking if he shouldn't be an inferior type, as she always said. After all he had seen, Milha admitted he wasn't an ordinary person. With a still confused look, she assured him that there was no way lesser beings could handle every type of spiritual art. The protagonist remembered what he had said in class earlier. Anyone could use all kinds of magic, as long as they distinguished the wavelengths. Milia sighed, asking him not to speak as if it were easy. Looking around, she also began to notice their conversation was attracting attention. Therefore, he decided they needed to talk somewhere else. As Dina walked ahead, Milia asked if he would answer the question she had asked. The protagonist gave an answer that she wouldn't believe. "I am just an ancient person who was sleeping in Kodama village for 100 million years. Thinking it was a joke, Milia played along. "So what were you doing 100 million years ago?" Thoughtfully, Jin revealed he had done many things. One of them was working as an agent. Milia was confused, as she did not know what that was. Jin explained that an agent was someone who worked hard for the country. Nostalgia washed over him as he remembered how he had fought against countless villains. Even though it had been 100 million years, Jin still recalled his missions as if they had happened the day before. Curious, Milia asked why someone so good would end up sleeping for 100 million years. The answer came with frustration. "I failed. I was arrogant and thought I could solve everything by myself. As a result, I lost everything." Without even being able to retaliate, Jim revealed he had accepted the position as an instructor because he thought he might need everyone to help him reach his goal. Milia listened to the whole story and wondered how much of it was true. Returning to follow her, Jim asked where they were going. The young woman stated she would be fulfilling her part. They arrived at a storage room filled with dust. The girl explained that the instructors kept the materials for classes there. The protagonist looked around, and on a shelf of the bookcase, the ornament of an owl caught his attention. Jin asked why they were there specifically. Milha showed some papers. She claimed to be conducting her own investigation. On the paper was a drawing. There was a space that did not appear in the blueprints of that room. It should be large enough to hold something. After hearing her, Jin approached the owl statue and pulled it. In the next moment, the shelf moved, revealing a staircase to the basement. That secret entrance showed Milha's hunch was correct. Confused, she asked how he discovered the room. Jin reminded her that the place was covered in dust. The ornament was the only thing that was clean. He found out something was wrong with the object, thanks to his intuition and experience. Warning that he would check the area, Jin asked her to wait for him. Desperately, Milha wanted to join him so she wouldn't be alone. The protagonist warned her. If there was anything dangerous in the basement, it should be an erosive substance. Milha asked him not to underestimate her. It may not seem like it, but my notes are among the best. I have strength that is not inferior to my brother's. Jin decided to trust her and allowed Milha to descend into the basement with him. The stairs extended in a spiral shape. The protagonist used light manipulation to create a glowing sphere so they could see. As they continued to descend, Jin commented, "This place has the atmosphere of a scene where monsters would appear if it were a fantasy world." Changing the subject, Milha remembered that he had said earlier that he had always been fighting villains. Therefore, she asked if he suspected someone. Jin warned her that she was asking too much for a single day of investigation. Still, he had one suspect, Professor Rudman. Milha asked why he said that. The characteristics around Rudman were clear. He was kind when he spoke, but when he was silent, his mind seemed to travel elsewhere. That was a trait seen in people. They are forced to do something different from their original goal. Rudman's state of alert was also unusually strong. Confused, Milha revealed that she thought Professor Gita was involved. Jin, on the other hand, stated that it was impossible for Professor Gita to be involved. He was someone who displayed all his emotions. He had no secret side, so possibly, deep down, he could be a good person. As they talked, they finally reached the basement. The place was vast and gigantic. They couldn't believe it was truly located beneath the academy. There was a fog in the space, dust, and a chilling air. Jin suddenly stopped, alerting Milha. Is something wrong? The protagonist's eyes widened as he found something unexpected. In front of him was the door to one of the laboratories that Kagura had left in various regions of the world. The laboratory door was protected by nanomachines. There was no doubt about that. Milha, seeing the large door in the school's underground, was surprised. She asked if Jin thought they could get in. The protagonist explained that a key was needed for that. As she was still confused, he told her to think of the access key as a key that would open the door. Thinking about it, he remembered that someone in the Kodama village had inherited the key. Therefore, there should be one for the door in front of him as well. The protagonist wondered if he could force his way in using his power. Upon touching the door, a voice was heard. High-level access authority, Jin. Confirmed. The door will be opened. As soon as the doors opened, Milha covered her mouth with her hands, trying to hide her shock at what was inside. The protagonist frowned, coming to a conclusion. The one trying to bring chaos to this country is certainly the one who possesses the access key. Inside the room, they immediately encountered a giant cage. Inside it, an erosive, dozens of times larger than a human. The shock nearly knocked Milha down. She couldn't believe there was something like this beneath the academy. She asked how Dinho had opened the door. He had said a key was necessary. The protagonist replied that the ancestors had special access. Hearing how Jin referred to himself, Milha wondered if the story about him being from 100 million years ago could be true. Jin walked through the laboratory. He encountered several other cages with monsters, dozens of them, but something was strange. The monsters were quiet. None of the erosives in the cages showed any signs of rage. Thinking about this, Jin remembered the erosive the bandits had captured. It had also been sitting quietly in its cage until it was released. There was something more important. Given the size of those erosives, there was no way they could have been transported down the stairs they had come through. Seeing all of this, Milha murmured, "It seems your intuition about the academy being suspicious was correct. Brother." Milha had an idea. Wait to ambush the mentor who orchestrated all of this as soon as he appeared. Jin refused. There was something more important. We must block the entrance of the academy immediately and eliminate these erosives. The young woman was surprised. She asked if he was really going to let the mentor behind all of this escape. Jin understood the young woman's feelings, but he made her think with a question. What would happen if the erosives here were released uncontrollably? He reminded her that the first victims would be the academy students. Above all, Jin assured that Milha's brother would prioritize the safety of the people over capturing the criminal. Milha lowered her head, agreeing. Additionally, Jin had a bad feeling about all of this. With a keen sense of premonition, he wanted to investigate the laboratory as quickly as possible. He instructed Milha to contact Argos to block the academy. Can I count on you? The protagonist moved to another room. A calendar clock was displayed above the door. He sought to find clues. He ignored the mysterious clock and went deeper into the lab. In the halls, Professor Gita needed to hear smiles and muffled jokes. He ground his teeth furiously. There was nothing he could do but contain his fury. The professor was nearly going mad. His reputation was thrown down the well by someone of inferior species. Rita was sure the novice instructor was using some trick to demonstrate 8 types of spiritual arts. While the professor flailed, a woman approached, calling him. The director, worried, asked him to stop looking so strange. Seeing the bizarre dance, she stated that she wouldn't criticize him for having such odd hobbies. Changing the subject, the director asked if he had seen Professor Rudman. Gita scratched his head. He thought deeply. He realized he hadn't seen Professor Rudman since the entrance ceremony. The director sighed. This was a big problem. Besides the classes for the new students, she had some things she intended to discuss with him. While they talked, the director noticed something. She looked up at the sky. Dark, stormy clouds were forming in the distance. At that moment, Milha was running as fast as she could to leave the underground room. As soon as she returned to the storage room, she took a slight pause, gasping heavily. "I need to report to my brother urgently." As soon as she spoke, a dark voice emerged. "What will you report to him, Miss Olton?" Milha's gaze showed the shadow of fear. Before her stood the bald Professor Rudman. He stared at her with a smile that mixed mockery and malice. Meanwhile, Jin arrived at the depths of the lab. He found something he did not know what it was. There was a machine, like a large heart, pulsing energy to feed something that, for him, was still unknown. It pulsed as if it were truly alive. It asked if Kagura had done that. Jin accessed the laboratory information. The first thing he did was obtain the box that should carry a message and an injector of nanomachines left by Kagura. He hoped the scientist had left explanations. He first took the message cube. A hologram materialized, revealing the scientist, who greeted him. "Hello, Jin. Can you hear me? It seems you finally made it here." Kagura claimed to think it would be easy to arrive. After all, it was the closest place to the initial lab. Starting the revelations, Kagura claimed he had built something incredible in that lab. He sealed part of the device's functions within the nanomachines in the injection. He boasted about being a genius. "Do you know what device this is? It's a teleportation device." Jin was surprised to hear his old companion. He immediately remembered the giant monster found at the entrance of the lab. Looking at the large, pulsing machine, everything became clear. The erosive monsters were calmly in their cages, as if waiting for something. Seconds passed on the lab clock until the expected moment arrived. The machine, which became the heart of the teleportation, continued to pulse while Jin analyzed its information. It served to connect 2 points in space. This was a technology that did not exist when he fell asleep 100 million years ago. This meant that, regarding the appearances of monsters that Argos mentioned, they were being transported with the aid of that device. Jin continued watching the video where Kagura presented the teleportation device, the one he had shown. However, it looked like a glass tube with a portal inside it. The protagonist immediately realized that the design of the one built by Kagura and the one in the laboratory were different. The protagonist wondered what exactly that was. At that moment, after so long waiting, the teleportation device was activated. A great red light spread across the room. Din raised his hand to shield his eyes. The monsters in the previous lab room began to be affected by that energy. In the blink of an eye, they all disappeared, being teleported. Then, Rhea, after discovering what was happening, ran to her division captain. "Lord Argos, the royal capital is in emergency." Argos looked at the sky, indicating he was already aware. The worst possible scenario had unfolded. Erosive monsters had emerged in the sky above the capital Cormosia, falling upon buildings and houses. In the storage room, Professor Rudman taunted young Milha. "What's wrong? You seem troubled, Lady Olton." He smiled wickedly, teasing her, using light magic to prepare for an attack or defense. The young woman bravely said, "Get out of my way. You were behind all this, weren't you?" Revealing he knew Milha had been investigating for a while, the professor warned, "It's too late!" Concerned, the young woman asked what he meant. The professor did not hide. "Today is the day the plan will be put into action." He sighed, revealing that it was originally scheduled for a few days in the future, but he had to move it up since they were investigating. The professor knew that not only Milha was involved, but that the man who had arrived at the academy was a threat. "I knew instinctively that he would be a bigger headache than your brother Jim." At that moment, Jim was running as fast as he could to escape the laboratory. The professor pointed to the secret passage, showing that the man who investigated him had discovered it. Approaching Milha, Rudman questioned, "Isn't Jin down there?" Milha positioned herself in front of him, ready to stop him. "Do you really think you can get past me?" The professor arrogantly laughed. "Of course I can, because I obtained infinite power." The professor's conviction was so strong that he didn't notice a little girl approaching him, carrying a clay jar. Milha widened her eyes, trying not to reveal Hakama's approach. The professor reached into his suit to grab what would be his new power. However, in the next moment, the sound of the jar shattering over his head spread. Milha watched the scene with surprise and confusion. Hakama wiped the sweat from her forehead with relief. Proudly, she looked at the professor on the ground and declared, "I won!" Still restless, Milha asked what Hakama was doing there. The girl stated that she had been looking for Jin. With the door open, She showed that everything was a mess and that they needed his help. The girl with rabbit ears, Kudo, was behind Hakama. She was the one who said she saw Jin enter the storage. Emilia asked if Kudo was a newcomer. The girl, scared, bowed and introduced herself. Yes, I am Kudo. Worried, Kudo grabbed Hakama's arm, asking if it was okay that they hit an instructor. Hakama assured her that it was fine since the instructor hadn't seen their faces. They could blame the arrogant little princess. Everyone heard hurried footsteps coming up the stairs. Looking towards the entrance that led to the basement, they saw Jim finally arrive. He saw everyone there, including Professor Rudman, and asked what was happening. Hakama, worried, approached, revealing what was going on. Outside, he already knew very well and warned Milha about something she still didn't know. The erosives that were inside the laboratory have disappeared. She immediately understood what that meant. Everyone ran out of the building that served as a storage. When they reached the highest point of the academy, they could see the city. Several places were on fire. Explosions happened at every moment. People were running for their lives, trying to escape from the erosive monsters. She saw monsters like giant deformed wolves and even birds were flying overhead. They captured people with their beaks or claws. The erosive giant that Jin encountered at the lab entrance was also invading the city. Its gaze was directed towards the castle. The monster swung the tentacles covering its face. It began to prepare for the attack. It opened its mouth while gathering a large amount of energy. Melia trembled at the sight of the monster about to attack the entire royal capital. The protagonist gritted his teeth. He realized he had made a wrong decision by not destroying the device as soon as he saw it. The bed pointed to a location. Jim! The monster had spent enough time preparing its attack. A sphere of energy was in its mouth, aimed at the castle. The bed couldn't believe the monster would truly attack the castle, even from such a great distance. Melia held her hands in fear. If this happens, the royal family will be in danger. The protagonist grabbed a syringe filled with nanomachines. He assured her, I will take care of this. As he injected the nanomachines into his body, he remembered the power that Kagura had warned he would receive. It was a simple teleportation ability. However, the energy gathered in the nanomachines would only allow him to use the teleport once a day. It was also limited to a distance no greater than what he could see. While Jin was still injecting the nanomachines into his body, the erosive monster attacked with an energy cannon released from its mouth. Jin vanished suddenly, leaving the three girls behind. He reappeared between the castle and the erosive monster's attack. Immediately, the protagonist created a spatial shield, blocking the attack and saving the castle. When the monsters fell upon the city, chaos ensued. The guild worker who had met Argos in the forest ran to the base. Guild master, there is a giant erosive monster at the outer walls. The man looking out the window warned. I already know, but, he stated unhappily, there is nothing more we can do. The man with white hair and gray wolf ears was the guild master of the royal capital, Hardin Gonzalod. He warned that he had already sent everyone who could move to help with the rescues. Meanwhile, the Sacred Knights were doing the same with their available members. The young guard asked what exactly the guild master meant when he said they could do nothing more. Hardin revealed that half of the Sacred Knights were currently outside the royal capital on a mission. This was a huge shock to the young girl. From the window, they saw the great erosive preparing its attack. This must have been planned, a crime that would happen in the absence of the Sacred Knights. Hardin, disappointed, knew that if the captain of the guard had been present, he would have been able to stop that great monster. With nothing to do, he watched as the huge energy cannon was fired at the building. Hardin closed his eyes, waiting for his end. However, his assistant pointed to the window. Guildmaster, look! Hardin opened his eyes hurriedly. A man had appeared in front of the window. He blocked the attack directed at them. The young girl, excited, recognized that person. He is the man from Kadama village. Only a bit of smoke rose to the sky as the monster's attack ceased. After his failure, the protagonist retreated, landing atop one of the castle's inner walls. He gathered energy in his hand and launched a retaliatory energy cannon blast at the monster. The strike hit the erosive squarely, making it scream in pain. Jin frowned upon seeing the result of his attack. The monster's shoulder had been severely damaged, but it was healing at an observable speed. The monster was far too large for Jin to eliminate it in one go. Furthermore, he felt that using the teleportation had consumed more energy than expected. Things would not end in such a peaceful manner as usual. Since that was the case, he decided to employ another tactic. The protagonist's hand materialized a sword. He swung the weapon. A cutting energy blast traveled toward the monster. The attack hit the enemy, inflicting another deep wound. Jin seized the impact to advance, shortening the distance. However, he was still far away and needed to cross the entire city. He hoped that, in the meantime, the attack would buy him some time. He wanted the monster to be fully regenerated only when he reached it. Jim tried to stay focused. He applied the basics of nanomachine concepts, A gravitational energy surrounded him, lifting the weight of his body. Jim also created wind that propelled him with each jump. He manipulated the atmospheric pressure and accelerated his movement. As he advanced, he saw a fish monster pushing a guild member to the ground. The monster was trying to devour him. A fireball fell on top of the monster, saving the guild member. It was not Jin who saved him, but curiously, the duo of students Milha had sent to attack him. The guild member got up, thanking them for the help while finishing the erosive. The duo did not care about helping in a city in chaos. They knew what they had to do. United, the three began to fight together against the monsters surrounding them, but without taking risks. Jim passed through the monsters, eliminating them with a single strike each. The guild member was left in awe at the speed of that man. The two young ones recognized the inferior species man from earlier. After passing through the street, he was able to see the large monster ahead. It would still take some time for its regeneration to finish enough to shorten the remaining distance. The monster continued to emit furious sounds. From its shoulders, which had energy pockets like a volcano, 2 attacks were fired toward Jin. When he noticed their approach, alert, the protagonist dodged each one. However, that was not even a threat. The protagonist kept advancing, knocking down more erosive monsters along the way. He intended to get close enough and finish the battle before the large erosive launched its powerful cannon attack. Jin moved faster and faster, getting used to the use of the nanomachines in the atmosphere again. Finally, he reached the square where the monster was. He jumped towards it, circling around to get a better angle of attack. The monster turned to face Jin, turning its back to the castle, no longer a direct threat to him. Argos and his companions, along with Milha, Hakama, and Kudo, watched as Jin faced the monster. The protagonist advanced across the rooftops, delivering cuts at angles never before imagined. Every part of the large erosive monster was hit in ways it could not block or evade. Being so large, it became an easy target for Jin to hit. The protagonist delivered each attack while climbing up the monster's body, leaping into the skies, facing the monster from above. Jin prepared the final blow. The sword in his hand transformed into a spear charged with strong electricity. Jin launched it at the monster to end its existence. The spear fell from above onto the creature's body, which exploded, completely engulfing everything around it and permanently ceasing its threat. The large explosion was seen even from the royal palace, where the guild master was. Both the young messenger and he were left agape. What happened? They saw the gigantic monster disappear and wondered who that man was who faced it. 3 days later, the reconstruction of the city was in full swing. From the hotel, Jin could see people carrying logs of wood, as well as other materials, repeatedly. He stretched after the nice dawn he had. No major incident had occurred since 3 days ago. Thanks to how skilled the holy knights were, the protagonist sat down, sighing, to rest. Jin wondered if they were prepared to face the eroding giants. With the teamwork of the knights, things were resolved quickly. The Harnisk Academy was also closed for investigation. Rudman, who seemed to be the mentor, was captured. Instructors and the headmistress of the academy were also taken for questioning in the royal capital. The protagonist lay down lazily, knowing that the academy would be closed for now. However, the incident had created something to worry about. He could handle enemies that were together. But when they were spread over a large area, there was no way to face them all at once. To protect everyone, Jin knew he needed to become stronger. This could only be done by finding other laboratories. Jim picked up the information cube, about to check it again, when someone knocked on his door. Upon opening it, he saw a young blonde girl in a big party dress, bowing to greet him. "I came to guide you, Professor." The change in Milha had been complete. Her arrogant look was replaced. Her clothes, which exuded power, were swapped for an outfit that tried to bring cuteness and elegance. The protagonist felt confused by her words. As the academy was closed, Milha eventually revealed that her brother was calling for him. "My brother wants to thank you for what happened. He is also with someone who wants to speak to you." Jim couldn't believe she had come all the way for just this. Milha felt it was obvious. "Of course I would call someone like you, Professor. It would be rude to send just a servant proudly representing the Olton family." Milha had personally traveled for this. Provocatively, the protagonist asked if she had stopped calling people inferior species. Milha nodded, claiming she had learned her lesson. Brilliantly, she declared, "I will no longer judge people by their appearances. Everyone deserves respect." That said, she begged Jin to let her stay by his side. She wanted to learn from him. As Milha spoke, the bed appeared behind her. Rolling his eyes, Jin thought, "Wow, look at how she's acting now." When Dinha saw the bed, she revealed she had been bored in the dorms. That's why she wanted to visit him. Milha's gaze shifted to the bed. This countryside girl coming in here? How embarrassing." Immediately, Jin asked her if she hadn't said she learned a lesson. Jin was taken to Argos's mansion. Maids and butlers bowed to receive Milha's command. The head butler called Poirot and Nino to show Jin around the place. The protagonist saw that the two had already gotten used to working there. As they walked down a long corridor, Jin asked if the brothers had any trouble during the big commotion. Waru revealed that everyone else worked together to protect them. Each of the maids and butlers was extremely strong. Jin internally thanked them for taking good care of the brothers. Aro mentioned hearing that Din had been amazing. He asked who had told them that and found out it was Milha and Argos. Milha was pleased to receive credit and promised to share news of her success. "Professor, it is my duty as a disciple," Milha laughed, telling Poir and Nino that if you both are from the same race as the professor, you should follow his example. Cheerfully, the duo agreed. The boy leaned closer to Jin to whisper, "Until recently, Milha was really tough on us, but she's been much better lately." Jin ended up comparing Milha's personality to Charles. They had completely changed after witnessing their abilities by following the youngsters. Jin arrived at a golden door. Poirot knocked on the door, announcing the guest's arrival. Upon entering, Jin found himself face to face with Argos and a man he didn't know. The man with wolf ears and a serious gaze, marked by a scar, stared at him. Jin remained silent. Argos and the brother greeted him. Before leaving, the knight asked Jin to sit with them. Jim sat on the sofa in front of Argos and the man, with Amile and Hakama behind him. Argos apologized for the sudden invitation. The protagonist reassured him, stating he was bored. Argos introduced the man beside him, the master of the Guild of the Royal Capital, Harding Gonzalez. Harding stood to greet the protagonist. He stated that it was an honor to meet him. Returning to their seats, Harding said he had seen him the other day. To be honest, he commented that if Jin hadn't stopped the giant monster, the country would have faced great problems. He bowed his head, deeply thanking Jin for saving him. The protagonist didn't take all the credit for himself. "I just knocked down the big guy. The Holy Knights were the ones who handled the rest. You should thank them." Argos smiled at the reminder. Harding acknowledged that the man in front of him was very humble. He was not greedy like others. The protagonist asked if they had called him just to thank him. Harding denied this, revealing that, because of the incident, the royal family wanted to meet him. The protagonist was surprised and paid attention to the guildmaster's words. He wanted to know who Jin really was, before allowing him to meet royalty. Thanks to the guild members in each city, there was no news he didn't know. Arden revealed he had taken the liberty of investigating him, but didn't discover anything about him. Argos agreed, stating he also wanted to clarify things, and asked Jin to not hide anything anymore. He wanted to know where he had come from, and what he was doing in the country. The protagonist remained silent, listening to the demands. After asking his question, Argos waited attentively for a response. The protagonist scratched his head, explaining that he wasn't trying to hide the truth. He just hadn't told her because he knew they wouldn't believe him. Milha and Hakama, who had already heard the story, fell silent. Argos assured him, "If those are your words, I will believe them." Upon hearing this, Jin stated that he would trust him. His expression was serious as he revealed, "I am a human who lived 100 million years ago." When he heard the entire story, Argos fell into deep contemplation. He knew about the taboo of the Kodama village. The tale of a human being sealed behind doors that could not be opened was astonishing. Hardin found it hard to believe such words. Milha stepped closer, assuring her brother and the guildmaster, "It's true. I believe him." The instructor opened the ancient door to the academy, the one that should never have been opened. Furthermore, she remembered that everyone had seen the power the professor possessed. Argos was in shock when he heard his sister's words defending Jim. He wondered what had happened to her to cause such a change. The protagonist revealed that he had remained in deep slumber beneath the country for a long time. The reason for going to the capital was to gather information about the current era. Hardin investigated, asking what kind of information he wanted. The protagonist did not hide. "First, I need information about the erosives, as they existed 100 million years ago." Surprise was the word that defined what Hardin and Argos felt upon discovering that those monsters had origins so ancient. Din asserted that, under normal circumstances, erosives should not exist in this era. He was questioned about why. The answer, of course, was due to the power of the spirits. Jim revealed to the two men before him that 100 million years ago, the spirits were scattered across the world by a cannon. The nanomachines were launched into the atmosphere, falling all over the world. At that time, the erosives could only survive in polluted environments. But the spirits had the power to purify this pollution. Hardin questioned why the erosives still existed. Jin did not have the answer. He took one of the cubes and made it create a hologram. He revealed that a friend had told him that the erosives were evolving. Seeing the item in Jin's hand, Hardin was surprised. Surely that was from an ancient civilization. He tried to understand how it worked, but had no idea. The idea that Jin was really someone from 100 million years ago started to make sense. Jin proceeded with his explanation. He stated that because of this, he had gone to the capital. I thought that there should be records here, including how people dealt with the erosives back then. Argos asked what the second reason was for him being there. Jim revealed that the laboratory beneath the royal capital had been built by a friend of his. I am looking for the laboratories that are spread around the world, he revealed. He concealed the fact that in each laboratory, he would gain new powers. After putting away the cube, Jin declared that he had a single goal. I intend to eliminate the erosives from the world. The room fell silent for a moment. Hardin assured that this was an ambitious statement. Argos agreed with him, but chose to believe in Jin. Shido, our goals regarding the erosives are the same. That is why you should avoid telling this story to others. They will think you have gone crazy. Smiling slightly at the advice, Jim stated that he was already aware of that. Argos then asked the man next to him. Hardin decided to believe since Argos believed. Moreover, he knew that someone without malicious intentions would not risk their life to protect the castle. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Poirot and his brother apologized for the interruption. They needed to warn that their scheduled time was approaching. Argos stood up, realizing the quick passage of time. He looked at Jin while asking Poirot and Nino, "Can I trust you to get him ready?" Jin felt something strange about those words. He followed the duo of young men. Later, a carriage sped towards the royal castle. Jin looked at the scenery through the window. He was still wondering if he really had to greet the royalty of this country. Even so, he questioned whether he really needed to wear those noble clothes. Jin was forced to change his coat for a fine suit. He wore white gloves and his hair was slicked back with gel. Argos asked if he didn't like the clothes. They matched him perfectly. Argos remembered how even his sister and the other girls praised him. Jin just found those clothes uncomfortable. Hardin warned him that the person he would meet was the first prince. The prince was acting in place of the king. Therefore, appearance really mattered. The protagonist maintained a serious expression despite his discomfort. He hoped at least that other problems wouldn't arise. The carriage entered the castle grounds. Inside the palace, guards lined up side by side with swords. Others held powerful lances. Hardin knelt before the prince, announcing, "I brought the one who saved the nation from a crisis." The prince commanded, "Raise your head." The protagonist, also on his knees, lifted his head to look at the prince. His name was Tiles Kermosia. The protagonist acted politely. "It is an honor to meet you. My name is Jin Shidu." The prince looked at Jin with his red eyes. The sun illuminated his blonde hair and pointed ears that resembled a vampire. Without much expression, he announced, "On behalf of my bedridden father, I offer you my gratitude as his proxy. You have done well." Jin continued to listen to the prince, who mentioned he had heard that Jin came to the capital from Kodama village. He hadn't expected such a great talent to come from such an insignificant place. Such an open insult confused Jin. The prince was direct. "Serve me as a holy knight of this kingdom. You will devote yourself completely to the prince's request." Jin fell silent. He wondered if there was a problem, as he had not heard a response. Hardin tried to intervene. He stated that he was the one who called Jin to the castle. "I don't believe speaking in such a coercive manner is right," Jin interrupted the guildmaster, speaking for himself. "I do not intend to stay in this country much longer." In response, the prince claimed to have heard that he was working at the academy. The protagonist revealed that it was a temporary job. The prince looked down at him. "In other words, you are refusing, aren't you?" The protagonist apologized but confirmed the rejection. The prince's voice grew dark. "This cannot happen." Immediately, all the holy knights rushed to surround the group. They pointed swords and spears at them, under the prince's orders. Hardin shouted, "What do you plan to do, prince?" Before he could rise, a guard brandished a sword in front of him, preventing him from moving. The prince accused, without evidence. "This man is suspected of disturbing the state." He reminded them of the sealed door beneath the academy. There was an erosive substance inside. He claimed that such a man had opened that door. Naturally, he became a suspect. Tales invented the greatest absurdity that could be said in that room. Even if his act was to save this country, it was likely a performance he taught himself. Wasn't it? Hardin gritted his teeth, irritated by such irrational arguments. While the guildmaster showed great fury beside him, Jin maintained a calm expression. The prince looked up, thoughtful. "Even so, it would be a waste to lose such power. If you had said you would serve me, I intended to let the matter go." With a mischievous smile, he provocatively asked, "But since you refused, there's nothing to be done, right?" Argos could not accept the words of the prince. Just recently, Jin had arrived in the city. Being involved with what happened was impossible. Argos had already informed about the investigation he requested from the prince, and yet such a plot unfolded. He looked around at the figures nearby. He blamed himself for not realizing it was a trap. Upon his arrival, first there was the captain of the 3rd unit and the captain of the 4th unit of the Holy Knights. They had fanatically sworn loyalty to the first prince. These two were willing to commit injustices in the name of the prince's good. It was obvious what had been planned. They intended to dispose of the guest if he refused to follow them. The prince declared, "You are the man who defeated the giant Erosive. Letting you walk free is too dangerous." Extending his hand, he claimed he would be merciful and give Jin another chance. The prince demanded once again, this time with a smile, "Swear loyalty to me." The room fell silent again until Jin commented, "I still don't understand." Confused, the prince frowned and asked what he did not understand. The protagonist questioned, "What is the meaning behind a verbal promise in the situation I'm in? Even if I comply with words, if I flee afterward, the oath will mean nothing." Argos, nearby, internally agreed that such thinking made sense. Jin revealed his thoughts. "To me, it seems like you want to force me to say this. I've been wondering all along if you merely want to satisfy your desire for dominance, or if there is some wicked motive behind it." The words cast a dark atmosphere around the prince. At that moment, the tip of a spear was pointed directly at Jin. Its bearer shouted, "Watch your words! Who do you think you are to speak like that?" The captain of the 4th unit of knights, a man with bull horns, was the bearer of the spear. Dinya grabbed him. She recommended that he look closely. With a strong grip around the spear, the knight could not move it anymore. On the contrary, he was lifted by Jin and thrown to the ground with all of Jin's weight. The protagonist responded to his warning. "Who is talking? It's me, the prince." He was surprised by the sudden action. Argos scratched his head, knowing what was coming. The captain of the 3rd unit became furious when she saw a comrade being attacked. She extended her hand towards the protagonist. She tried to use holy power. However, the spiritual arts refused to activate. With no options left, she ordered, "Turcheno." The knights under her command rushed towards Jin. One knight attempted a thrust with his spear. The protagonist grabbed his weapon, pulling it while countering with a high kick. Taking his spear, he used it to knock down several other knights. The prince saw no alternative and shouted, "What are you doing, Argos? Join them! Make him pay for showing his fangs to the royal family." Argos gritted his teeth. He stood up against his will, drawing his sword. He pointed it at Jin, asking him not to take his actions personally. The prince laughed excitedly when he saw Argos obeying him, warning, "I don't care if you let him live. Surround him." All the knights attacked again. However, before they reached the protagonist, a mist of space energy surrounded him. Jin disappeared from where he was, avoiding the attacks of swords and spears. The prince looked around, searching. The protagonist's voice echoed through the palace hall. "It is not wrong to say that letting me walk freely is dangerous. If I wanted to destroy this city, it would be easy, but the reason I don't do it is that I want to be an ally to the people." As he spoke, the guards tried to search the hall for him, without success, as Jin was already far from his original location. He pronounced, "I am here to protect the people who live in the present." Approaching from behind the prince, the protagonist warned, whispering in his ear, "However, there are exceptions for the villains who cast shadows over people's lives. I will show no mercy." The prince felt the darkness fall upon him as the man with the sharp voice asked, "So, what kind of person are you, Tayo Scormozia?" Hearing the man's voice behind him, Tayo Scormozia shivered gloomily. The prince was silent, taken as a hostage. The captain of the 3rd unit raised her broad sword. "Do you understand what you are doing to the prince?" The protagonist merely replied, asserting that he was resisting someone who was trying to force him into something unacceptable. The young captain of the 3rd unit gritted her teeth at a loss for words. The bull, leader of the 4th unit, questioned him, trembling. "Do you intend to oppose this country?" The protagonist corrected him. "It is not me who is opposing, but you." As everyone looked at him, swollen with pride, he declared, "If you are of royalty, I will show you respect. If the rules of the country are followed, and if the request is reasonable, I will help, but I am not cheap enough to obey irrational things." In silence, the only thing the knights could do was hold their swords. Jin warned that they could not complain if he resisted when they tried to force him into something. Before anything else, he asked the prince one more time, "Are you someone who thinks everything will go your way or something more?" Prince Teos looked slightly back and met an enraged gaze that could end his life in a blink. At that moment, the doors of the royal hall were opened and a girl's voice echoed. "I heard the story of what happened." Walking gracefully along the red carpet, in a dress that resembled snowy mountains, the princess asked if she could join the conversation, seeing the young girl approaching. The The captain of the 4th unit tried to warn her. "Lady Charlotte, it's dangerous!" Argos sheathed his sword. He felt relieved by Charlotte's arrival. He would leave everything for the second princess to resolve. Lady Charlotte, curvy, smiled gently as she asked, "Are you having fun, brother?" Teus frowned upon seeing her. The regent prince noticed among the knights that Argos was calm. He understood what was happening. Charlotte sighed with a voice full of pity. "My brother, what trouble you have caused. If you are inviting the hero who saved the country, you should have invited me too." She reminded Teus that he shouldn't be in that position. "You are not even father's representative." Teus gritted his teeth. He asserted that the man beside him was not a hero. He was a criminal showing fangs to the royalty. Curious, Charlotte asked if that was true. The captain of the 3rd unit rushed to respond, "Yes, that man hurt Commander Wasa." However, the princess questioned if it wasn't because Wasa acted rudely. Not understanding the princess, the commander of the 4th unit pointed to the royal seating area. "Look there, he is about to hurt the first prince of this country." Charlotte, however, asked if what Jin was doing wasn't just being close to Teus. Being questioned by the princess, the protagonist smiled and confirmed, "That's right, I was just staying close to him and asked a question." The irritation of the first prince grew. He was provoked by the princess. "Surely you wouldn't call someone a criminal just for being near you, would you? Especially if that's the hero of the country." Against such allegations, Teus had no response. The princess turned to Jin once more, bowing slightly. "I won't ask you to serve this country, but if this country faces troubles, would you help as a friend?" The protagonist accepted the request. "I will lend you my strength with pride." Clapping in gratitude, Charlotte invited him to talk somewhere else. She passed by the knights, ordering, "Guide my friend. Get out of the way and show some respect." The guards, summoned by Teus, were forced to obey. The prince could only glare at them with irritation. Later that same day, a carriage left the castle. Argos was still afraid of what had happened earlier. He asked why Dina had acted that way. The protagonist had felt a strange presence from the prince, but hoped it was just his imagination. Regardless of what he thought, the young woman in front of him had helped them. Charlotte assured that there was no need for thanks. Instead, it was she who should apologize for treating them that way. This time, the hero Jin stated that he did not need apologies. However, Charlotte insisted, thanking him and asking him to continue being a good friend of the country. Confused, Argos asked why Prince Teus had acted so rashly. The second princess knew how ambitious her brother was. After taking the throne, he planned to start wars with other countries to expand the territory. Charlotte believed her brother saw Jin Shido's existence as an obstacle to his desires. Argos was surprised, while Jin remained thoughtful. The princess quickly urged them not to worry, as she would not allow him to interfere with the incident that had occurred. She believed Hardin would already be reporting everything to the king. If her father placed restrictions on Teus, he could not easily go against the hero Jin. However, he was not worried about that at the moment. Charlotte continued, "I also do not intend to hand the throne over to my brother. Do you believe me, Mr. Din?" With a slight smile, the protagonist agreed. Changing the subject, Argos asked where they were going and why the princess was in the carriage with them. When the carriage stopped, the princess got down, stating that she would like to reward the hero. With a look of regret, she commented that she had heard he was staying in a inn. The protagonist nodded as he followed her. With Argos by his side, the princess looked up as they stepped out of the carriage. With a magical glow, she revealed what she had prepared for him. The protagonist's mouth dropped open when he saw the huge mansion behind the princess. She revealed that this was a village left by a noble who departed from the royal capital long ago. He could use it freely. Upon entering the mansion, Jin came across a large entrance hall. A shining chandelier illuminated from the first to the second floor. Concerned, he asked if it was all right to receive something so grand. The princess laughed, agreeing. She revealed that originally the mansion was to be given to someone with the rank of count, but it would no longer be used. Confused, Jin asked if such a person wouldn't return, but received a smile in response. Charlotte seemed unwilling to invest in the topic. Still, Jin thought receiving a mansion was excessive. Argos intervened, stating that this was the value they gave him as a friend. He urged Jin not to hesitate. The protagonist was introduced to his new home in this future world. He walked through the hall and then into the kitchen, checking the furniture. Princess Charlotte also introduced him to a reading room. Uncomfortably, the protagonist stated that this place was far too big for a single person. Sitting on the bed, he noticed how extraordinarily large it was. Argos recommended that he arrange for servants to help him. He reminded him of Poar, the boy who would be happy to assist him since they both worked for Argos. The protagonist asked if it was all right to receive them like this. Argos didn't make a big deal out of it. Instead, he asked if he could make a request. Jin was curious to know what it would be. Sometime later, the two headed to the training grounds of the 7th Night Division. All around, Knights could be seen training with swords or spears. Karina was also present. Her opponent attacked her, and with sharp eyes she found the ideal spot to block the attack. Disarming the knight, Karina threw his spear into the air. Aiming her own spear at him, she captured him. Thus, the young knight surrendered. Someone applauded Karina's skills. He laughed and congratulated her on improving. The knightess was a rookie. However, she claimed to have a long way to go. In the recent incident, Karina realized she could only handle small enemies. Meanwhile, the man she confronted was able to eliminate the strongest of the monsters. Scratching her head, she asked where her next opponent was. Internally, she questioned how a man of inferior species could be so powerful. Amidst Karina's confusion and irritation, she heard a knight announcing the arrival of some people. It was the commander and Lady Charlotte. Karina was surprised to see them. Argos walked with the princess, instructing everyone to continue their training. Karina then saw, behind her commander, that man. Her fury peaked immediately. She watched him with narrowed eyes, wondering what he was doing there. Argos covered a seat with a cloth so the princess wouldn't dirty her dress. Finally, Jim asked what Argos wanted. The commander mysteriously claimed that he would understand soon. The protagonist looked at the knights and asked if Argos wanted him to train them. Argos reminded Jin of what had happened earlier. Prince Teos was reckless and was fighting Charlotte for the throne. Therefore, they didn't know when or what could happen. Those who could protect Lady Charlotte were those who had sworn loyalty to her. Currently, only the 7th Division was available. It would be serious. Argos expressed that he did not know when the critical moment would arrive. That's why he wanted Jin to train his team for when the time came. The protagonist observed the knights training. They all already had sufficient skills. They also seemed to train regularly. However, there was one visible problem in each of them: efficiency. Jim felt a bit nostalgic. Even 100 million years ago, he would become an official agent working for the country. He trained as if his life depended on it. Suddenly, Argos ordered everyone to gather. The knights approached to hear Argos's announcement. Today, to improve the quality of training, we will invite the country's hero as a special instructor, Argos announced. He will teach us what we still need to learn. Do you understand? Everyone nodded. Jin noticed that many were excited. It would be easy to teach them. However, there were those who seemed against it. They would be problematic. To check everyone's stamina, Dinho ordered them to run around the training field. Karina was surprised by the exercise and irritably warned, "We already do this all the time. Everyone has enough stamina." She pointed at Dinho. "You came to make us do pointless things." Next to her, Ria warned her that she was being rude. Argos was also going to reprimand her, but Dinho stopped him. He approached and informed that they could use another method. He took off his cloak and walked over to some weapons. Remembering that Karina used a spear, he grabbed one for himself. With the spear in hand and pointed at her, Jin challenged, "Try to score a point against me. There will be no time limit for you to try." Argos watched intently. The princess beside him was also curious. Jin knew that no one wanted to be taught by someone weaker. Therefore, he would show his strength. Karina smiled, asking if he even knew how to use a spear. Jin threw the spear up, making it spin. Finally, he caught it swiftly, to the surprise of the young knight. With confidence, he declared, "There isn't a single weapon I can't use." 100 million years ago, Jin trained at an academy. Holding the iron spear above his head, he softened into a thrust. Someone approached, asking if this time he was training with a spear. Jin recognized the voice belonging to the scientist Kagura. Interrupting his lunch, Kagura asked if Jin had a hobby besides training. Jin explained that when he was a child, he used to watch superhero movies. This led him to choose such a style. Kagura handed him a cup with liquid so he could hydrate. He asked Jin to rest a bit. Being the best agent the country could have, he could afford some rest. However, Dinho claimed he did not have that kind of time. Frequently infiltrating enemy organizations, sometimes even being sent without anything to defend himself, he had to learn to use anything as a weapon, even pots. So, it didn't matter what weapon it was. Jin wanted to be able to use it to increase his chances of survival, even if just a little. Kagura was surprised by his motivation. He sighed lightly. "Someday I will create an invention so you won't have to worry about weapons." 100 million years later, Jin was using spear techniques again. Karina charged at him. She tried a low strike, but her spear was blocked. Jin saw through her intentions and blocked once more. With an aerial attack, the protagonist raised the spear, moving Karina's weapon out of her reach. Disarming her, he advanced with his own spear to hit her, but stopped a few centimeters away, scoring a point. He reminded her that she had already lost 15 times in a row. Karina wiped the sweat from her brow, not giving up. Once again, she grabbed the spear and charged forward. Karina tried to use her hearing, aided by her rabbit ears, to predict Jin's movements to some extent and move quickly enough to dodge. With great bravery, she attempted to counterattack. Jin recognized that she was strong. Each spear strike had real weight behind it. This demonstrated the power of evolved humans. However, he would defeat her easily. Once more, Karina's spear was knocked to the ground, and Jin pointed the sharp tip at her. "This is as far as you will go." Karina did not want to accept defeat. "I can still fight." She shook her head negatively. Jin warned that it would be pointless. He stepped back, giving his verdict. "You still need more stamina. The more you fight, the weaker you become." The protagonist sheathed the spear internally. He evaluated the young knight. She did not have great stamina. Her movements relied solely on her physical abilities. She was not refined, likely because she focused mainly on spiritual magic. In combat, compared to the warriors of his time, the required skill level was different now. To improve them, Jim wanted to first make them increase their stamina. Approaching, he asked if Karina had any complaints. In the end, she had to admit, Jim wasn't even sweating. She didn't know what was happening. The man reached out a hand to help her get up. Biting her lips, she internally admitted that he was strong. The protagonist noticed that something was wrong and stared at her in confusion. Karina looked at him and took his hand, accepting the training. Thus, Jin announced, "Let's start running." Everyone was surprised by the confirmation of the order. Hours passed, and the training continued. A crow flew over the capital. Its owner was entering a dungeon, opening a cell. Prince Teus found a prisoner inside the cell. The man was surprised to see a big shot visiting him. Teus wanted to speak with the mentor of the last great incident, Professor and Lord Rudman. Rudman sighed, stating that there was nothing to talk about. Teus noticed how calm he was and asked if Rudman was planning something. Rudman replied mysteriously, "Who knows? The only thing I can say is that even if you have escaped this time, soon the royal family will fall." The prince laughed curiously, interested in the lord's confidence. He took something he had kept in his robes, a necklace with a purple crystal. He asked if Rudman was confident because of something like that. Rudman was surprised to see the item. "Impossible! How do you know about this?" The prince mocked Rudman for thinking he had a secret of his own. The invasion tools were artifacts that sealed the power of the corruptors. The prince knew that Lord had used something similar in that incident to control the beasts. Seeing concern in Rudman's eyes, Teus warned him that he didn't need to panic. They were just starting to talk. Teus made a proposal. "You don't want to destroy the Cormosia royal family, so why don't we join forces?" Both the father and Charlotte were too weak. Soon the country would be invaded and fall. Trying to investigate the prince's intentions, Rudman asked if he really wanted to destroy the royal family. The answer was affirmative. Tails has his convictions. This country needs to be rebuilt. It needs to become stronger and be a nation with authority. For that, I want the power of the invasion tool you possess. Upon hearing the request, Rudman fell silent until he made his decision. However, he stated that he could not promise to make Tails the new king. The prince said Rudman didn't need to worry about that, but asked him to swear loyalty to him. The prince extended the stone to the lord. When he gave the order, Rudman was confused about the oath. The prince nodded, saying he did not want to be betrayed. For Rudman, however, an oath made no sense. He intended to use the prince to the fullest and eliminate him at the end. He had no intention of allowing the royal lineage to continue. He falsely swore, "I offer my loyalty to you." Prince Teo smiled maliciously upon hearing the words he longed for. The stone in the necklace in his hands shone brightly, releasing a powerful energy. It struck Rudman and imprinted deep within his soul the words he had just sworn. The prince finally revealed, "This is not a common invasion tool. It places a strong suggestion in the minds of those who speak certain words. Even if they are lies, it makes them believe as if they were the purest truth." Rudman, affected by the artifact, knelt before the prince. The gaze of the former teacher became hazy. It was as if his will no longer existed. He frankly begged, "My lord, please give me an order." The prince mocked how pathetic the man was. A human with the lowest lineage was trying to eliminate the royal family and take their place. That disgusted him. Rudman, being nothing more than a pawn to be used, provided Taus an opportunity to act. He bent down beside Rudman and whispered, "The one who must rule the country will not be Charlotte or you. This country is something only I will possess." As such arrogant words were uttered by the prince, the training led by Jin continued. The protagonist kept running for hours. Eventually, he started to sweat. Jin loved physical training. "Dying really makes me feel good," he thought. He decided it was time to stop and looked back. Those who followed him, however, were already all on the ground. Like in movie scenes, the protagonist scratched his head. He apologized to Argos for going too far. Argos reassured him that it was no problem. He himself had noticed he was also low on stamina. The commander of the 7th Division expressed his thoughts. They used to travel by horseback, and battles were often decided through spiritual magic. Because of this, he had underestimated the importance of stamina. He made the decision to improve this characteristic for now. Dinha felt it, stating it would be the best option. Changing the subject, he asked if the princess should not return to the castle. The princess smiled, asking if she was bothering him. The protagonist assured her that was not the case. Even though she was accompanied by guards, the princess imagined that if she did not return soon, there would be complaints. Before leaving, however, the princess stated that she needed to confirm something with him. One of the knights handed a small bag to the princess. The item inside it was revealed to Jin. Charlotte asked if he knew what that object was. It was a red hourglass that exuded a large amount of energy. The protagonist immediately felt a great familiarity between the item in the princess's hand and the teleportation machine below the academy. Jim asked what exactly that was. Charlotte revealed that the item had been secretly confiscated from Rudman, one of the invasion mentors. It was a cursed tool that used the power of the corruptors, something they referred to as an invasion tool. The protagonist was surprised to discover the existence of such an item. Charlotte explained that they did not know who made them or even how, but such items granted great power to those who possessed them. The protagonist swallowed hard, shocked that something like this existed in this era. The item the princess carried looked like a machine made with parts from corruptor bodies. Seeing the hero's exaggerated reaction, the princess believed that the item was familiar to him. The protagonist revealed that he had seen something similar below the academy and, thinking it was dangerous, destroyed it. Argos commented that what Jin destroyed had caused the great incident. Charlotte praised the wise decision he made. If the machine had been left behind, the enemies could have tried to recover it. Charlotte assured that she would also investigate where the tool in her hand had come from. She also asked Jin to share anything he discovered. With that, the princess left. Argos and Jin stayed behind. The knight stated, "We cannot let another incident like this happen. We need to be careful." The protagonist felt it lightly. His distant gaze caught Argos's attention, who asked if something was wrong. Jim just did not insist on the matter. Corruptors were usually agitated. The protagonist wondered if the monsters he encountered in the underground were also being controlled by invasion tools. However, they seemed to be waiting for their master's command. Their movements also looked coordinated. This could possibly explain the power of these tools. Suddenly, the protagonist recalled something Kagura had told him. Evolving corruptors had appeared. They even destroyed the observation satellites. Imagining that there might be individuals capable of leading others made Jim feel terrified. 4 days later, Jim returned to Harnisk Academy. The director was massaging her shoulders. She was still incredulous. She never imagined she would be detained for an entire week. Argus smiled, grateful for her cooperation. The director complained. She had said all along that she was not involved in what had happened. Still, she was shocked that one of those involved was in her academy. Argus did not blame her for that. However, the director took responsibility for not noticing. She acknowledged that if Jin had not been present, the situation would have become irreversible. The protagonist asked her not to worry about it. The director revealed she had heard he was hired for an investigation. She also mentioned he was not connected to the Order of Knights. The protagonist confirmed the information. This made the director think even more that he had no obligation to save them. She stood up and bowed, expressing her gratitude. "Thank you for protecting this country and my students." The protagonist nodded, accepting her thanks. Argus was pleased to see them changing the subject. The director asked if he planned to continue as a teacher now that he had been discovered. The protagonist thought for a moment. Needing money for his travel, he planned to work for a while. However, after the incident, he received a big reward for it. Money was no longer a concern. Argus assured that they could find a substitute for him. The director, however, "I wanted him to stay. I won't let you go, no matter the circumstances. You accepted the job, so you have a responsibility to fulfill." She also stated that it would be unfair to the students to quit after the first day of class. This applied to both Jin and Argos. Her words were reasonable. The principal explained that she wasn't doing this to be mean. She asked both of them to follow her. They walked down the academy hallway. As they walked, Jim asked what had happened to Professor Gita. Argos had difficulty explaining, but revealed that the professor was still detained. Currently, Gita was shouting in prison, claiming to be innocent. Meanwhile, Rita had been trying to twist the story to embarrass Jim. She was punished for her lies. Changing the subject, Argos revealed that there were several reports of suspicious behavior. Jim warned that the professor was harmless, so they could let him go. The principal acknowledged that Gita had tried to take down the hero. Therefore, she wanted him to cool off a bit. While they talked, they arrived at the room the principal wanted to show them. When the teacher opened the door, Jim was amazed. He entered the auditorium, where all the students of the academy were waiting. With his hand on his hip, Jim asked what was going on. The principal explained that everyone was there for him. Everyone looked at Professor Jim enthusiastically. The rumors that the hero who saved the country was a teacher had spread. In one of the seats, a young girl was anxiously gnawing her teeth. Milha was complaining. They finally realized the greatness of the professor and completely changed their attitude. They were not ashamed to be beside her. Elias commented that she had done the same. One of the students approached Jim, saying she had something to say. She revealed that on the day of the incident, she had skipped class to walk around the city. That was when a monster appeared in front of her, leaving her completely defenseless. She thought it would be her end. It was then that the professor passed by her, eliminating the monster that threatened her. Tears filled her eyes. The student expressed deep gratitude. Several other students approached him, sharing similar stories. The principal placed her hand on his shoulder. As you can see, you probably have your own reasons, but even if occasionally, it would be fine with so many students excitedly surrounding you. Jin heard the crucial question, "Aren't you going to teach them?" This made him accept everything. 100 million years ago, in a dark alley with rain falling on him, Jin ran among the ruins of buildings. He had recently discovered the corruptors, thanks to Kagura. That had been the name given to the monsters by the government. They were creatures born from corruption and depravity. Kagura explained to his team that the corruptors existed in heavily polluted areas. He did not need to finish his explanation, as one team member concluded for him, so there's nowhere for humanity to escape. There was a different look on Jin's face. Sana Sakuma, the team member who spoke for Kagura, approached to see what had happened. Mizuki and Kazama, two other team members, asked, "Where did Jin's confident look go?" The protagonist classified this new enemy not as humans, but as indestructible monsters. Even with missiles, they were monsters that could not be completely defeated. He asked the team if they had a way to win. Everyone fell silent. Sana, however, approached and pinched his cheek, smiling. She asked him, "Aren't you the strongest agent in our country? What good will come from you acting like this? Just keep that calm look on your face." Sana also had a thought and looked at Kagura. "If the environment is clean, the monsters won't be able to survive anymore, right?" The scientist agreed. Kagura revealed that the team of scientists was currently developing devices to restore polluted environments. It would only depend on how humanity would endure until the device was ready. Sana became confident upon hearing this. "Then, isn't it simple? We just need to persist." As always, her confidence brought a slight smile back to Dia's face. He agreed with his cheerful partner. However, one by one, each team member had been destroyed by the monsters. Jin fell to his knees upon seeing them. In his gaze, the shock of losing them. It was then that he heard one last time. Sana still held a remnant of consciousness and called him. She had already expected Jin to be alive. Running to her, Jin warned that he would treat her. However, Sana already knew it was too late. Holding his hand, Sana asked, "Listen well, I won't ask you to save the world from the corruptors. Just don't give up until the end, until the last second." Thus, Jin heard his companion's last words. With Sana in his arms, Jin contacted Kagura via radio. He made a decision, reporting about the experiment that uses nanomachines on humans. "I accept." Kagura asked if he was sure, as if it were incompatible, he would not survive. For Jin, the result would be the same if he continued fighting that way. Thanks to Sana, the confidence to not give up had been born once again. The protagonist woke up in the middle of the night after the dream. He scratched his head, sighing. Near the bed were the 2 information cubes he had found so far. Picking up one of the cubes, he ensured he had not forgotten his mission and his oath. The cube made him review a photo of the old team he had sworn to. "Once again, I will definitely make the world free of corruptors, no matter how long it takes." In the north of the Kermosia kingdom, in the territory of Plusa, stood the fortified city of Melmos, where a message was arriving with urgency. A knight was running desperately to inform. "The enemies are emerging from the Bielhart kingdom to the north." The man on the walls warned the young knight that he was late, as he could already see the enemies from where he stood. Glyn Oz, the great commander of the Sacred Knights. He was on standby in the vast plain. Thousands of monsters were approaching the city of Fortaleza. They were giant winged monsters, birds, and slimy creatures. They all had one thing in common: they were dangerous. Against such a number of monsters, the commander revealed that it would be difficult to face them, even for them. Desperate, the young knight asked what they would do. In the commander's hand, a magical energy appeared. He hurled an energy cannon at the monsters. However, before the energy could reach the monsters, dark energy doors swept away the attack. The commander was surprised to see his attack blocked. He immediately ordered the knight to alert the king. Glyn assessed that the enemies were invaders who could erase spiritual arts. They were also in a group of unprecedented size. As Glynn wondered what had happened to the invaders to make them so powerful, one of the monsters stood out. It marched at the forefront of the army of corruptors.